Okay, if everyone could take their seats, we're going to get started. Madam City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Mayor Kelly Krebs.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Robert Parkhurst.
Here.
Council members Edward Garcia.
Present.
Council member Jean Goss.
Here.
And Council member Christine Lowe.
Present.
Madam Mayor, all members are present this evening.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Garcia, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and inspiration tonight?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just pulled up a few inspirational, motivational quotes. Usually I try to have a timely inspiration, but you know, we're at that time of the year where we're getting close to finals in college, and the kids are getting ready for the AP exams. So I'd like to just kind of give the students in our city a little just a little word of encouragement. Just some few quotes. Nothing is impossible. The world itself says, "I'm possible," by Audrey Hepburn. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference, Winston Churchill. And as you probably know, this famous quote from Dr. Seuss, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the guy who will decide where to go. Dr. Seuss. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the agenda or any comments?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. How about a motion to approve reading resolutions and ordinance by title only?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any comments to the meeting minutes from April 9th?
Madam Mayor, the City Clerk's office did not receive any requests for amendments to the minutes.
Any from? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from April 9th.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to mayor and city council reports. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first since it's quick.
Sure.
Out of town for almost a couple weeks, so I have no report.
Very short. We're going to go in order, Councilmember Lowe?
Sure. On April 11th, with Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, we attended the Chamber Mixer at Kensington, and I really encourage you guys to try to reach those mixers. It's really neat to see the businesses that we have in Sierra Madre, and they're always really exciting, well attended. The Rose Float Association was there, and a few other entities in Sierra Madre really showing us like how to collaborate with other groups in Sierra Madre. So that was pretty exciting. I also attended the there was a League of Cities meeting about public safety, and we were looking at some of the different laws that are covering our changes in theft right now, and we were really focusing on how we're changing law. For instance, if you have a bunch of small burglaries or a lot of small even robberies in Sierra Madre, and they're only add up to a certain amount, those are all misdemeanors, and so they just get passed over and passed over and passed over, and the person can continuously do the same action without much of a consequence. So we're changing law to try to accumulate all of the different misdemeanors even, and then therefore add those amounts together so that it becomes a felony and a harsher crime. So we're looking at that.
Great, thank you.
go?
Sure, thank you.
On April 10th, I attended the Transportation Subcommittee meeting. Usually I report out on that, but I'm going to defer to my colleague here, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, and he'll fill you in on that. April 11th, due to a work commitment, I was unable to attend the COG meeting, but I'd like to thank Mayor Creeves for filling in for me ably at the last minute, I might add, as our alternative. On April 13th, I was very happy to attend the Whiskey and Wine event sponsored by the Sierra Madre Community Foundation up at the House of the Youngs. It was extremely well attended. It was just a lot of fun. I just wanted to thank the foundation volunteers. They were out there all night in the pouring rain so that the people who had participated could have a nice time. Especially like to thank my friends Heather and Jason Young for once again providing their beautiful home for the event. And last night I attended the Library Board Trustees meeting. Public Works Director Yanez was there and introduced the new project manager for the library project. She works for Vertex Engineering, and her name is Natalie Hazard. Ms. Hazard was very gracious in her remarks last night as she reviewed her role in the library project, and I suspect she'll be down here soon to introduce herself to us as well. That's my report.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
So, yes, on 410, as Councilmember Goss said, we had the Transportation Subcommittee or committee, and we, at that committee, committee members John Lloyd, Max Romero, and Ann Palmer reported they went to the Metro Service Council meeting in El Monte to support the changes to our bus line. And what was really great, the report out we got from them is that all board members had a positive and supportive things to say about the changes to our line. And the final approval for that line will go before the full board, and it will start back up at the end of June. And then we're moving on to the next stage of our plan, and that is we're going to need to look at how we have the roundabout in the city. And Analyst Carlson is put together an RFP that will go out in the upcoming weeks, and that will be our next phase of this. And then we'll move on to kind of a third phase, probably overlapping with the second, looking at mobility in the city. As Councilmember Lowe mentioned, I went to the Chamber Mixer, and yeah, it was a great event. Echo her words there. The Chamber does a great job of bringing businesses together, and I always appreciate those events. On the 13th, went to Legendary Bingo, the fundraiser for the Rose Float Association, and it was packed. They were clearing tables. Every seat was full. It was another raucous night, a lot of fun. I wish I'd stayed to the end, but I then ended up going up to Whiskey and Wine to try to get to both events, and it was equally very well attended, and just absolutely fabulous evening. Clean Power Alliance had meetings on April 15th and 18th, and nothing to report from there. And then also on April 15th, the Community Services Commission had their meeting, and boy, we have a lot of stuff coming up. We have a couple of things that are coming up between now and the next meeting. There's and the mayor will have details on most of them, but we've got the Library Art Fair, Nursery School, Carnival, Bark in the Park, Older American Reception, Fire Department Service Day, Chili Cook-Off. That's all before the next council meeting. And then, of course, we've got the Mount Wilson Trail Race and a Kensington event on aging. So they are just making all kinds of great programs and events for our city. The other thing is that there's a special meeting of the Community Services Commission on Thursday at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. It is in Council Chambers, right? Thank you. That's what I thought. To discuss the park for the Meadows development. And then on Sunday, I was at an event with Pasadena Humane, the Wiggle Waggle Walk. It is a great event for your pets. It has a 1 mile loop and a 5K, and it was absolutely very, very well attended, including by Supervisor Barger and her dog. And that was a great event. And then the last thing I just want to mention, and it's something that I've kind of learned being here in the city and being working with the city departments. I had my credit card stolen for my business just recently. Not actually physically stolen. No one came and robbed my wallet, but I got a fraudulent charge. And in the past, I wouldn't have ever thought about it, but in talking with the police department and kind of learning about what they can do, they can help support if you get more charges on it. Of course, you report it to your bank and you get all of the charges reversed, but if there's ever a dispute, having that police report is extraordinarily handy. So as a public service announcement to everybody, even if you don't think it, even if it's a virtual stealing, I encourage people to take advantage of the incredible deputies and detectives in our city to help us with those matters. And with that, I turn it to you.
Great, thank you. I will not repeat events at which I attended with my colleagues, including the Whiskey and Wine, which I have nothing more to say other than not only was it raining, it was also cold. And so I really, great kudos to the organizers because it was incredibly well attended for how poorly the weather was, especially this late in the year. So always a great event. And I think they raised quite a bit of money, which is obviously the point because as many of you know, they then take that money and give it to many, many of our local organizations, including programs for the city, I think including for the bookmark contest, which we're announcing the winners of this week. So they are supporters of so many of the great things we do in our city. As Councilmember Goss mentioned, I did fill in for the COG meeting where we had an update from the homeless subcommittee and some programming that they're thinking of. No decision was made, but an interesting collection of parking meters to help fund homeless endeavors. And so that was a robust discussion around that. And then the environmental subcommittee is monitoring legislation locally and I assume federally on forever chemicals and the various actions that are coming out to ban forever chemicals. And then this past week, I attended the Natural Resources Committee meeting, and they are full steam on planning for our Earth Day celebration this Saturday. And then also filled in for Councilmember Lowe at the Planning Commission meeting, and it was another Planning Commission meeting. So many things I think that will end up up here for our discussion. So it was good to see them firsthand because I'm sure we will be discussing many of the issues that they discussed, including the Alverno Villa TUP and various code ordinances that we spent some time on as well. So it was, I can tell you, it was more excruciating watching than it actually was participating in those discussions around ordinances. So I feel for you all.
How long was that meeting?
It was 4 hours.
Yeah.
Which actually is not terrible, except for they start at 7.
Sorry, thank you.
No, I knew what I was in for. I saw the agenda. So yes, so that was my week, and I have some announcements. As mentioned, this Saturday, the 27th, from 9 to 1, we are going to celebrate Earth Day here in Memorial Park. We've done this many times. It'll be very similar. Lots of great booths. We have a lot of animal organizations this year, so please stop by. And I think there'll be music, and it'll just be a fun time. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. The art fair is 2 weekends later on the next weekend, on May 4th and 5th from 9:30 to 5, also in Memorial Park. It'll have over 65 artists, music at the bandshell, a silent auction, crafts, and face painting. This year there will also be a new emerging artist section, plus Art Center grad students. So come out and support all of these artists and enjoy the day. That's both Saturday and Sunday. On the 8th, our dispatchers will be having smoothies with dispatcher at My Friend's Cafe in Kirsten Court from 3 to 5 p.m. So those of you who are not morning people can still have your smoothie with a cop, but here it's a dispatcher on the 8th. On the 11th, the entirety of our fire and police department will be having their public safety open house from 10 to 1, I assume here at the public safety building. And as I mention every week, We are looking to fill 3 vacancies on our commissions, 2 on the Senior Community Commission and 1 on the Planning Commission. Those terms do begin on the July 1st, so we are definitely taking applications, and we'll look to fill those before that term begins. And I'll just reiterate the announcement that Mayor Pro Tem made about the special meeting here in Chambers on Thursday at 6 p.m. of the Community Services Commission, who will be discussing plans for the park that will be part of the Meadows development. And those are my announcements.
Madam Mayor,
Sure.
can we just add, so we've got Bark in the Park on May 4th, which is at Sierra Madre Park, is that right? And
Sierra Vista.
Sierra Vista. And what time is that one at?
I believe that's at 9 in the morning.
It's at 9 in the morning. And then the Older American on May 8th is going to be at the Hart Park House, is that right?
That will be at the Hart Park House.
At what time?
I believe that's at 3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock. And then the chili cook-off, is that a part of the Public Service Day?
The Kiwanis Chili Cook-Off at the Recreation Center is separate from the Public Safety Day.
But it's the same day, and do we know what time it is?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at their permit request.
Okay, I can pull it here, unless Carlson, do you happen to know, being a...
6 o'clock, it sounds like.
Thank you.
From the gallery. Great. It's going to be a busy day on May 4th at Sierra Vista, because I believe that the Community Nursery Schools Fair is also that day. So get there early, because parking will be at a premium. I'm sure there's also Little League games all day. Okay, great. Thank you so lots of things going on. Take your choice, take your pick, and engage. Now on to some sadder news. As many of you may have seen on social media or experienced, this weekend we did unfortunately have an incident in our Bailey Canyon Wilderness Park. The police department activated our search and rescue to aid in the search for an overdue hiker. The search efforts were complicated because we had some low clouds Sunday night, so they were not able to use the helicopters. They did use the search dogs during the night search, and they did not find her in the evening. In the morning, they brought in additional resources from LA County Sheriff, as well as the helicopter from the Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the Sierra Madre Search and Rescue located the missing hiker's body late Monday morning. So I'd like to thank and acknowledge the efforts by our PD, our fire department, our Sierra Madre Search and Rescue, as well as the Sheriff's Department for all of their efforts. And we certainly offer our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of the hiker. And this is just a terrible thing, and it was, I'm sure everyone was sort of watching, hoping for better news, so I'm really disappointed and sad for the family that it didn't turn out better, but I appreciate all of the efforts, especially overnight, from all of our public safety organizations, and just the coordination between, our local agencies and the Sheriff's Department is always really welcome and appreciated, especially given the resources that they can bring. So thank you for that. And on that note, we will move on to something a little more celebratory, but also recognizing something tragic in our history. We are looking to present our annual proclamation against the Armenian genocide, and I think,
Madam Mayor?
yes.
Do we do public comments for items on the agenda
I was going to do this first,
Is that first?
allow,
Okay.
allow Mr.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was just looking at the agenda.
Yeah, no problem. So we wanted to go ahead and present the certificate, because I also believe that Mr. Donabedian would like to say some words, so I thought that would be good. So, as everyone knows, or may not know, the Armenian genocide was the systematic destruction of Armenian Christians living in the Ottoman Empire from the spring of 1915 through the autumn of 1916. There were approximately 1.5 million Armenians living in the multi-ethnic Ottoman Empire in 1915. At least 664,000 and possibly as many as 2.2 million died during the genocide. Every year in April, we give a proclamation and recognition of the Armenian genocide. The actual day of remembrance falls on April 24th. We do it as we've done now for years to recognize those who have suffered injustice. On October 29th, 2019, the House of Representatives passed a resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide, and on December 12th, 2019, the Senate did the same, making the recognition of the Armenian genocide part of the policy of the United States. Then, on April 24th, 2021, President Biden recognized the atrocities committed against the Armenian population by the Ottoman Empire in 1915 as genocide. Today, the city of Sierra Madre joins the state of California and the United States of America as we recognize the Armenian genocide. The National Committee of Armenia is here today to accept the declaration in this proclamation, and it is our honor to present this proclamation. Don't mind, I'll just read the certificate. As mentioned, from 1915 to 19...
Go for it.
There we go. Thank you. Whereas from 1915 to 1924, 1.5 million Armenians lost their lives at the hand of the Ottoman Turkish Empire as part of a systematic program of genocide. And whereas the Armenian genocide is a tragic example of what fear and intolerance of others lead to. The city of Sierra Madre is dedicated to remembering the atrocities committed against the Armenian nation and all humanity. And whereas Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day commemorates this tragedy and helps people understand the need to eliminate fear and other hatred from our community. And whereas we remember the past, we must dedicate ourselves to rebuilding a greater future by educating our community about the Armenian genocide and other crimes against humanity as a testament to mankind's indomitable spirit. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of Sierra Madre celebrates the Armenian spirit and hereby pays tribute and recognizes those who have suffered as a result of the Armenian genocide. Approved this 23rd day of April 2024 by the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre. Oh, the logo on the, yeah. Will you hold this? Yes. She wants the logo in the picture. And you'd like to say a few words?
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I have my colleagues with me, Maria Akizian and Harry Kazarian. Harry's a chaplain with the Pasadena PD, if you will. Honorable Mayor Krebs, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, council members, esteemed city manager Reynoso, esteemed city attorney Giragosyan, honored guests. My name is Danny Donabedian, chairperson of the Armenian National Committee of America Pasadena chapter. Benjamin Franklin said the following: justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. As the world goes through precarious ideological and political ignominy, we should not lose sight of those ruling the roost on the planet. To be fairly candid, the unique nations we've come to know as the industrialized nations have the means and resources at their disposal to find and secure just resolutions to the Armenian genocide and all other genocides that followed it, but have not shown the inclination or the wherewithal to do so. Shackled by political and strategic chains, perhaps, but what's that compared to one human life? Where's the perspective? Their spurious claim that they stand for truth and justice has been nothing short of disgraceful and abysmal. Their remedies to curing injustices around the world have not worked. It's time to stop saying empty words like our intentions are noble. As the old adage goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We can do better. Sadly, in the case of the Armenian genocide and the 1.5 million victims we memorialize today, and which was perpetrated 109 years ago by the scourge of humanity, the Turks, it remains to be seen if those words ring hollow or true. Today, we face another scourge of humanity, Turkey's alter ego, Azerbaijan, whose zeal to destroy Armenia remains even after declaring war on Artsakh, a historic Armenian land, indiscriminately killing its people, maiming, pillaging, destroying, taking prisoners of war, forcefully taking the country and exiling its entire population of more than 150,000 Armenians. You see, whatever evil and hateful nations do, whatever irredeemably depraved and malevolent people do, There will always be a recorded truth to counteract them. As the venerated and dignified Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, once said, "The truth may be incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is." In conclusion, we are always and forever faithful and hopeful as to what tomorrow brings. On behalf of the Armenian National Committee Pasadena chapter, I'd like to extend my gratitude to this distinguished dais as testament to your persistent search for human rights and justice for the victims of the Armenian genocide, and for providing solace to the Armenian American community by passing the Armenian Genocide Awareness and Prevention Proclamation, in essence showing that the Armenian cause is also your cause, and for that you have our utmost respect and admiration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now open for broader public comment. Just as a reminder on the code of conduct, we welcome and invite your participation. We ask that you stick to the 3-minute limit on your comments and refrain from making personal, slanderous, profane, or disruptive remarks. As we've said before, if you continue to disrupt this meeting, I will give a warning, and if you continue, I may ask you to leave. So otherwise, and I don't expect any of that, but any public comment this evening for items not on the agenda.
Madam Mayor, we have one email received in the city clerk's office for items not on the agenda. And we have 3 speaker cards. The first of the 3 is from Marcus Toussaint.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, Council, City Manager, City Attorney. Just want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. I'm here to talk to you guys about something fun and exciting that we're doing. It was mentioned earlier, but we're having our first ever public safety open house on May 11th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's going to be great. I hope to see you guys all out there. Hope the community comes out and join us. This is the first time that we've done anything like this in a really long time, and we're going to take this opportunity on International Fire Service Day to invite the community to come out and learn about your public safety. We're going to have tours. We're going to have people able to try on different equipment from the police and fire department, educational sessions about how to defend your house in wildfires, how to protect yourself through credit card fraud, you know, things like that. So it's going to be a really good time, really educational for the whole family. We got local vendors coming out to help us out. We're going to have food provided by Pie and Burger, which is a local restaurant in Pasadena. We're going to have all kind of cool demos. We're going to have SWAT demos, fire demos, helicopters flying over. I'm telling you, it's going to be a really great time. I also want to thank the leadership of Chief Bartlett and the Health and the Community Services Department, like Lauren and Rosemary, for helping us out and getting this event planned. And I think it's going to be a really, really good time. I hope to see you guys out there. I just have one more request from council. If you guys can help me with something, we're having a dunk tank. So if you can please, I'm going to give you guys emails soon, but if you guys also direct your executive management team to participate, I think it's going to be a really good time to get some community involvement, and then we could, you know, dunk some of the executive staff here and their council members. Chief Bartlett already said he'll go first. Assistant City Manager Miguel Hernandez said he'll go also. I saw a hand raised by Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst. I'm hoping Jose will be there. You know, I see the librarian back there, finance director. So planning director's back there also. So I really hope you guys all come out. It's going to be a great time. I thank you guys for your support, you know, for all the public safety, and this is our chance to give back to show our thanks to you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, the next speaker card is from Keith Stevens.
Last Saturday, April 20, there was a wedding at Alverno's Villa. We could feel the bass starting around 5:30 with the remaining musical frequencies catching up by 7. The volume increased again for toasts and speeches as the doors and windows were opened. As the evening carried on, my wife and I anticipated the upcoming silence at 9:30, the mandated end of party time in the Villa CUP. 9:30 came and went, but the music and noise persisted. We tried calling the monitor numbers we had to no avail. At 10 p.m., when the CUP mandates gate closed, loud guests were still in the parking lot. We called Sierra Madre police, who said they were aware of the situation and waiting for people to clear out. Event ending and closing were specifically addressed in the recent Villa CUP renewal. The Planning Commission has committed involvement of the city manager and police department for the third-party monitoring, making them, and in turn this council, accountable for these violations. These violations were not perpetuated by Alverno students, parents, or staff, or even Sierra Madre residents necessarily. Last Thursday, April 18th, 4 p.m., there was a girls' softball game on the Alverno field. Cars filled Highland and Wilson. Enthused parents lined the fence. Mayor Krebs, you have commented on the record in these chambers about your experience with girls' softball. I believe your exact quote was, the screaming. The screaming. Well, there was screaming and cheering, water fights with hoses, children literally playing in the street on Wilson. The crowd noise and traffic lingered past 7 p.m. beyond the 6:30 end time mandated in the Alverno CUP. The noise and code violations were not perpetuated by Alverno students, parents, or staff, or even Sierra Madre residents necessarily. This is one of many LaSalle High School games being played at Alverno, their new home. Daniel Threadgill of LaSalle spoke before the Planning Commission last Thursday, and he said, quote, "We currently lease the softball field at Alverno since we do not house softball or baseball on campus," end quote. A planning commissioner asked, "Don't you mean you're using it for free?" Threadgill replied, "Oh yes, they're letting us use it. It's just an understanding." This understanding needs further disclosure, including the date of first proposed. In the next couple weeks, Alverno will host overnight movie shoots overlapping with a wedding while school is in session. We believe there are problems with the signatures submitted for the overnight filming exception. Although classes, movie production, and the wedding will not occur at the same hours, we believe it violates the prohibition of concurrent events in the Villa CUP. The temporary buildings have been in place for 4 years, are empty, and have served their purpose. They are an eyesore and an insult to the beautiful and iconic villa. A 10-year extension does not meet Planning Commission findings. The school must live within their existing permanent structures and work towards their permanent master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Madam Mayor, the next speaker is Kristen Stevens.
Good evening. I sent a letter to, I believe it was Claire Lynn, I'm not sure if I CC'd you, Mr. Roneso, and it was about a grant that's in our state, and it has to do with helping residents fireproof their home. And so I was hoping our city could look into that more, because we need to do fire mesh screening and pulling landscape away, making changes. But I'm hoping our city will buy into or maybe try and get some of that grant for our residents. I'd also like to add that the compost giveaway was very good this year. It was so good, that stuff was still cooking when I picked it up. I think we made 6 or 7 car trips. We don't have a truck anymore, and I gotta commend Athens. It was really good, and they left the extras. It wasn't really over at once, so I was very grateful for that. I needed the time to dump and run. So thank you, City, for having something like that come in, and thank you to Athens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Madam Mayor, there are no other speaker cards at this time.
Thank you.
Oh, one more.
Oh, one more.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lisa Paleo, 672 West Highlands, and I'm again representing the Alverno neighbors. We've gone to the Planning Commission so many times with specific violations and of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code and the Alverno conditional use permit. And we've learned that they can't help us much in ensuring that Alverno doesn't continue to perpetuate these violations. And I've provided to you a list of the things that we feel that they continue to violate, and we are committed and passionate as neighbors, and we hope that you take a look at them and really help us to improve our lives and improve the violations that we feel Alverno is breaking on a regular basis. Mr. Stevens pretty much talked about it all, but in reviewing the filming and wedding schedules of Alverno, there is concurrent filming and a wedding on May 4th. And that's a big deal for us neighbors because it's all about cumulative use and events that are going on at the same time. The next thing is with the softball field, and Alverno is going to try to convince you that because LaSalle is using the field for free, that they aren't accepting any money for it. But we've learned that LaSalle is giving Alverno money to upkeep the field, and they're also paying liability insurance. Unfortunately, Sierra Madre girls softball team is no longer playing there, and we just have a feeling that it might be because they can't afford field maintenance. So that's all I have to say. Please help us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Playo.
No other speaker cards, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to presentation by our YMCA. I think we have Mr. Knopp here.
Good evening, Mayor Cribbs. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity. City Clerk and Deputy City Manager, thank you very much for the invitation, Laura. I appreciate it. Again, I'm very appreciative to be here. Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, Council Members Garcia, Goss, and Lowe. Thank you again for the opportunity and the invitation to be here tonight. Additionally, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the City Manager Reynoso, Deputy City Manager, as I mentioned, Aguilar, Chief Bartlett, Chief Barrientos, all the city staff who've really been very supportive of us, the Y, and including both past directors of Public Works, Samino, current Director Yanez, as well as Community Services team members. I hate to highlight and call anybody out, but Lauren Hines and Rosemary Garcia. Again, everybody's been very supportive, and we appreciate the relationship. On behalf of the branch, our local Y, as well as the LA Metro Y, which makes up 27 branches across LA County, I'd like to give you a brief summary of activities tonight. This is not, again, a formal presentation that I'm going to be putting up on PowerPoint tonight, but I want to highlight some of the things that have happened, not going into the way back of 23, but just kind of highlight activities, brief you on that because I haven't come before you to talk about that at this point, but then also give you some insight as to what we've already done in 24 and what we will be doing. I promise to be brief. 23, wide-led programming saw growth continuing with additional healthy lifestyle programming, including group exercise classes, increased youth engagement, play program at Sierra Madre Elementary, which is essentially, it was a recess program in 23. They now have hired, the PTA has hired a staff member there to teach PTA, but we provided that in 23. We also did programming at the branch, which was new to us in 23, ballet, hip hop, as well as karate. Increased swim lesson participation, branch leadership staffing, which was needed for sure. Increased youth and government programming, MLC and MUN, which is model legislation in court, as well as model United Nations. I'd like to reach out, and I will separately to all of you, to be either advisors and or participants in leading that effort, because it is all about teaching our young people in middle and high school about the purpose and the functionality of government. Summer day camp was very successful this past summer, averaging about 65 participants per day across our 9-week program. Our teen takeover events at the branch, Fallback Festival, which happened in November, as well as a Y Swim Meet. And we worked with the Anschutz Entertainment Group, and we're part of a Futures project down at the Rose Bowl, leading up to one of their festivals. And we also drove considerable increase in family, senior, as well as youth participation. The beginning of 23, we were at about 600 units. Again, I hate to use the term units, but whether that's a family having a membership, a senior, or a youth, or a regular adult, we grew to about 720 by the year end. So it was nice growth in 23 for sure. Our community engagement with the city of Sierra Madre and beyond included the Fire and Police Town Hall, COVID testing, Sierra Madre Girls Softball Picture Day, would have been rained out otherwise if not for the Sierra Madre room being used and put in play. The honors dinner, Chief Barrientos, we were involved in at least participating in Chief Barrientos' installment. Community bike event, Sierra Madre Rotary meetings as a guest and a host, which I appreciate that group very much. Tabling at the Mount Wilson Trail Race. We brought back the Float the Boat event for the Sierra Madre Middle School and had 170 8th graders there and their families, and just the most creative. If you haven't seen that event before, or if it's been a while, please come back. May the 17th, we will be hosting it again. Community Rec Swim from June through September was wildly successful. July 3rd in Memorial Park, we got introduced in part of that last year. We'll be more actively involved this year. The garden, if you haven't seen the garden at the Y, which is really ridiculous, or at the rec center, whatever you choose to call it, we really thank David Karp, who is also part of the Sierra Madre Rose Float Association, who is the lead volunteer. But all of the membership folks that come in are able to take fruits and vegetables out of that garden, and it's really a fantastic partnership. Flowers grown there do appear on the float every year in the parade as well. We assisted, you mentioning it today, made me think about us assisting search and rescue, sadly, last year in the summer when folks had to come down and needed a place to stay during the hot summer months, and that hot search that unfortunately ended the same way the more recent one did. And we hosted folks from Northern California over the course of 4 or 5 days in the Sierra Madre room. Nice air-conditioned space. The Challenger Summer Reading Program is part of Layla's team's effort through the public library. Again, Sierra Madre Rose Float Association Legendary Bingo, not once, but twice we hosted that event, or we're part of the hosting that event. The Kiwanis Chili Cook-Off, which we're happy to be part of again, coming up, as well as the Kiwanis Election Forum, which was probably the most heated event I saw last year at the facility. And then we had Assemblymember Holden there late in the year talking about issues related to the Y and the community and what can be done. I think that when we talk about incidents or things that happened physically at the building, fortunately, we didn't have any 911 transports last year, which we're happy about. There were 86 events that we noted, or what we call incidents. There's our involvement, bee stings to feeling lightheaded, but again, nobody was transported from the facility. Thankfully, we didn't have any active rescues actually in the pool. As we turn the page to 24, I'm sorry, let me go back for a second. The issues resolved are things that we worked on. There was a heat ventilation system resolved on the main pool heater, which it did go past the threshold of the $6,500, meaning that we take care of the first $6,500 for capital improvements in 23, and that additional cost did come to the city, but we paid the significant portion of that. And then we've been working on the elevator, continued working on the elevator, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at your interest. We talked about incidences. In 24, we have replaced the wading pool motor, which is about a $4,500 expense to us. We've made that investment. It's yours, but it does go into that facility. And again, continued efforts and work on the elevators taking place still that goes up, that's inside the YAC. Community programs in 2024 that we've introduced this year that are new, a Lunchtime and Learn program on women's heart health. It wasn't, again, just for membership at the branch, but community-wide interest. We had about 50 people on one of those days that the rain was coming down sideways, and yet they came out. I don't know if it was for the Lunch and Learn or for the Green Street Diane salad, whatever the reason they came. We're glad they came. We obviously have hosted the honors dinner and the first of the legendary bingo again this year. Upcoming in this next quarter, we have a Healthy Kids Day event, not to add 2 events to the calendar. Healthy Kids Day happens across the country at WISE. We hosted it this past Sunday, actually, for the LA Metro Association. Over 11,000 people were signed up to participate. If you could imagine, the Peristyle end of the LA Coliseum was covered with activations and youth activity. Incredible event, and I think probably about 6,000 showed. We're doing a minor, very modified scale event at the branch on this Friday from 3 to 6:30. All are welcome. Rec Swim will be taking place. It's open to anybody who'd like to come and participate. We'll have some other activities in the courtyard as well. We have Float the Boat again, mentioned coming up, 100, and I've been told by Principal Newsom as well as Mr. Dev that we have 199 8th graders this year. So an increase of almost 15 or 16% over what we had this past year. That'll be exciting on May 17th. May 24th, fifth graders are coming for their pool party, which again is part of the agreement that we've had in the past. We didn't have them last year. We are having them this year. We have an amazing program, Safety Around Water, which I really have to thank Councilmember Lowe for introducing and encouraging us to talk to the Sierra Madre Firefighters Foundation. We put together a program that's going to provide 24 youth with a complimentary 2+ week program to learn about safety around water. It'll take place from the 13th of May. It'll end on the 24th. The firefighters will also be part of it. Sierra Madre Fire will also be there to show their CPR programming, sidewalk safety, and also just talk about the kickoff to summer, and with it being Memorial Day the following Monday. So it's a great time to remind people about water safety and the importance of that. We have what else do we have going on? May 13th through, we talked about the Get Summer program. We'll be back again, 12 to 17-year-olds free to come down and use the facility during the summer, and that'll begin early June and run through the middle of August. We also, again, will be kicking off our rec swim. And then July 3rd, we have been invited and have accepted the invitation to lead the Kids Zone as part of the May 3rd event here in Memorial Park. And then we won't be sleeping, and hope many of you will come out and support us, because we are the lead on the Firecracker Fun Run as well the very next morning. So if you've seen the Y around doing a lot of things and activity-wise, I think that was not only as our commitment to the community, but I think it was our mission and charge to become re-engaged, and I hope we've honored that commitment. And I'm pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have questions?
Is it true the elevator has been fixed?
Councilmember Goss, I wouldn't quite go there, but it's very close to being true. So I think, yes, there has been a human being who has ridden up and down the elevator and come out of it without calling 911. So that's true. We're very close. We believe we're very close. And again, I want to thank not only the city manager, but also Director Yanes for really taking the lead and charging forward there.
So progress.
Progress, for sure.
So as you recall, when we renewed, or maybe recall from your staff, when we renewed your contract, there was a fair amount of dissent in the community about availability of programming. I mean, obviously you just laid out just an entire wealth of programming. Are you hearing similar things back from the community, or in terms of availability for swim lessons and free swim and things like that?
I think there's always outliers and wish that there were more. There always will be. But I do think, sadly or appropriately, you don't really hear a lot when you're meeting people's expectations. You really hear a lot when you're not. And so I think that the amount of tenor and talk is pretty, has been very quiet on our end. I haven't received any feedback that you're hearing a lot from the community members. So I think we're satisfied with that, and look to continue to appease by doing more in the community. We can always do more.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah, we will be coming before you. Our agreement does end the end of January, so we will be definitely having conversations and working toward that. I know it seems like it just happened this past February, but it'll be coming up soon.
Right.
A few
Thanks.
comments, Mayor
Sure.
Reeves? Not a question, but just some comments. And it's kind of riffing on what you said earlier, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank you, Director Knope, for being true to your word, because I'm not talking ill about the previous directors, but things that were important to us and me were hiring the youth. I know at least one youth that's been hired as a lifeguard that lives here in Sierra Madre. Taking care of that facility. I think most of us did get a tour of the facility after the previous leaseholder left, and it was in ill repair. And you've been honoring that and keeping that facility in tip-top shape. Happy to see the Hawks Regatta is back. My 8th grader will be participating this year. He's really excited. My 3rd grader participated in the play program when the elementary school didn't have the availability to have PE. Thank you for doing that. The town hall, legendary bingo, all these things I wrote down before you even said it, because I was thinking about all of the different places you're touching the city and the different organizations. I did hear from the events committee that you're going to be helping with, as you said, both the Firecracker Run, and you're taking over the 3rd of July events. We have a lot of volunteers, but they work really hard in the 3rd, and I'm grateful that they're going to get a little bit of a reprieve. So I just want to say, keep up the good work. We're thrilled with what you've been doing and the communications you've had with the city.
Appreciate
And let's keep it rolling, and we're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Good night.
All right, next we have our update from Public Works Director Yanez on the library improvement project.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, members of the City Council. I have a very brief, but very important update. Currently, Vertex is working on the request for proposals. This will be about a 2-week process, putting together these proposals for the multiple contractors, specialized contractors that will come on board in this project. We're looking at going 1 month beyond your normal 1 month publication. So we're looking at 2-month publication for the reason of throwing out a wider net, bringing in specialized contractors from the area. I feel that, and Vertex also feels the same way, that we will bring just a larger quantity, a bigger selection of qualified contractors to bid for this project. This concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any
So
questions?
we're still in a tight timeline. That 1 month doesn't cause any concern from you.
That is correct. Actually, yesterday, Councilmember, we had our first pre-construction meeting with Vertex. This was a half-day meeting, about 5-6 hours. So it was pretty intense, but I feel very happy and very comfortable with where we're currently at.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite our Finance Director, Gabriela Leon, to give our long-term budget presentation. I should say our award-winning Finance Director.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Okay. City Council members, good evening. Today we'll be discussing the long-term budget projections for the general fund. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide a city funds overview and also bring back the long-term projections that were prepared as part of the mid-year process. We will start with a citywide funds overview, and then we'll discuss the main operating fund, which is the general fund. And we will end with any questions, and there's no action to be taken today. So this presentation will focus on the general fund. A brief overview of the city funding sources is beneficial for background information. So the city does receive both, can receive both unrestricted or restricted revenues. For unrestricted funds, it's the general fund, and the general fund is used to support all departments and general operations. The remainder of our presentation will be focusing on the general fund and discussing that one. On the other side, there's also restricted funding. And for example, utility funds can only be used for water and sewer operations. And we also have special revenue funds. Some examples of those are district assessment funds, grants, or donations received. As mentioned on the other slide, the general fund is an unrestricted source of revenues that can be used for general operations, and it funds basic city services such as police, fire, library, and community services. On this slide, we can see the revenue types in the general fund. And as we can see, Sierra Madre is dependent upon property taxes and UUT, utility users tax, which make up together about 69% of the revenues in the general fund. In this slide, we see the recently amended budget, budgeted revenues by type, and for presentation purposes, it excludes any one-time revenues received during the fiscal year. So now let's discuss what is funded with these revenues. In this chart, we can see various departments, and they're funded with the general fund. This slide shows the expenditures by department, so it's the same information in a different format. The general fund funds public safety departments, which makes up about 51% of the expenditures. We also have administrative services department, which accounts for a portion of internal service funds like IT, finance, HR, admin services. And it also included in this portion is the city's annual contribution to the pension. Library and community services are also funded with the general fund, while also receiving special revenue funding for programming. And lastly, we do have a elected and appointed category, and that's primarily to budget for city clerk services, legal services budget, or elections during the year. Before going over long-term projections, I do want to provide a brief overview of the process. So at mid-year, a 5-year projection was done for the general fund with the information at that time. For revenue projections, we received property tax and sales tax estimates from our consultant. And for utility users tax, we use historical trends to project out into the future. And we've seen a trend of around 3% increase each year. On the expenditure side, payroll was projected using 7% increase. This includes the merit increases and a 2.5 COLA. Other expenditures were increased using 2.5%. And as we can see, this is the minimum expenditures projected. So what's not included in the long-term projection? So in order to maintain structural balance, recurring revenues were compared against recurring expenditures. So which means that capital purchases are not included in these projections. What's also excluded is any salary matrix adjustments to bring pay closer to market. And also lastly, we do anticipate public safety expenditures to increase, but we'll have better projections as we get master plan results. So to provide some background on our personnel side of the budget, this chart we can see the full-time positions in 17-18 and also the current fiscal year. In order to form a full-time fire department, the city increased staffing levels by 13 positions. When we look at recurring revenues and recurring expenditures, it's projected that revenues will not grow at the same rate as expenditures. And we can start anticipating a deficit starting fiscal year 25-26. Starting fiscal year 26-27, we start seeing a deficit of about 1 to 2.2 million. And when the city formed a full-time fire department, it was anticipated a new funding source would be required. On the expenditure side, the city does continue to use zero-based budgeting to review each line item before it's being proposed. And on the revenue side, the city continues to look for funding sources, opportunities, and is currently undergoing a user fee study to ensure we get cost recovery for services provided. But what becomes difficult is bridging a gap of 1.4 to 2 million without a new ongoing funding source. Without a new ongoing funding source, difficult decisions will need to be made in order to bridge this gap. This concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions? Councilmember Goss.
Thank you for the excellent report. With regard to authorized positions, refresh my memory, please. We had administrative services. Went from 12 to 16, from 17, 18, and 23, 24. Do you have, off the top of your head, those positions that changed?
It's a combination of IT, one in finance, and then communications, admin, and admin services department. And one in HR,
Okay.
correct.
So that includes our current IT staff?
Yes.
So was that a new activity for the city at that time?
So when we transitioned from contract services to in-house IT, we hired one IT manager, and then there was a need to bring in one additional personnel.
Right.
We have two IT personnel that administer our entire operation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lowe?
Following on that kind of path with the personnel, I know we're still waiting for the master plan for both fire and police department, and that could change the anticipated amount of positions. Could you tell me how much we spent on paying for a fire marshal this last year?
Yes, thank you for the question. For contracted services for fire marshal, it's trending around 34,000 each year.
And what does our fire marshal do versus, or you might have to ask someone else, what does our fire marshal do versus our fire department in terms of the Department of Prevention?
Mayor and council, so I've asked all department heads to be here to answer specific questions. So I can talk a little bit to it, but our fire chief is here and he can expand. So our fire department does take care of our multifamily, some of our commercial, some of our churches, as far as annual inspections.
Take care of means?
Doing annual inspections. I'll let our fire chief expand.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Basically, our fire marshal is a required position that we're going to have, but we contract out as we don't have on staff that skill set or that level. It's a special skill through training, certification, and everything. But basically, the fire marshal helps us to keep within compliance, within safety regulations, provides risk management, and then also can potentially help us with the insurance requirements on some homes, right? By basically through inspections and stuff. But overall, contracting with the fire marshal services is a proactive step towards safeguarding our communities, our properties, assets, and most importantly, the lives of those who live in and work in and visit our community. And he really oversees the high-level stuff. For instance, code adoptions that we have to do. He has the expertise to basically read through that, understand it, see what's going to implicate our community, to see if we need to be a little bit more stringent on our local codes. We have that ability, and the fire marshal is basically helping with that. He will also do plan checks and look at making sure that whatever we put in, for instance, any development, that is going to meet current codes and regulations and make sure that they are done safely. As one of our residents talked about earlier, home hardening and such, all new develop will follow current codes, which is Chapter 7A and home hardening. So that's the kind of stuff that the fire marshal will do for us. Also field inspections as far as sprinklers, restaurants, if you're looking at some of the sprinkler systems in there and the hoods and things like that. Internally, the fire department itself will do inspections. We're mandated to do inspections such as multifamily residents, schools and churches. Those are some of our mandates, but we will also do brush inspections throughout anything north of Grandview currently. And then we also try to get in as many as we can as far as commercial inspections. So it is our prevention department or division, if you will, is broken up between the two. And hopefully that kind of makes a little sense.
When did we start hiring or jobbing this out? When did we start contracting for fire marshal services, and why?
Previously, that position was held by Captain Snyder or Fire Marshal Snyder, but due to his retirement, we did not have staff in place. So in order to fulfill all the needs and requirements, we contracted out for that level of service.
Do you remember, I don't know if I remember this in our presentation or our paperwork, how much do we pay for that contract service? I mean, not total amount, but what is that per hour usually?
Yes, we contract with Wildan for the fire marshal services, and it is per hour. So it varies throughout the months, basically. depending on how many plan reviews that are done, how many field inspections, and then he is also available on a consulting type of basis for myself if I have some questions that are fire marshal related or fire prevention. He can help with that.
I believe the finance director mentioned it was around,
Yeah.
so we're projecting like $34,000.
I was thinking per hour, 'cause I'm anticipating in the future, we're looking at increased costs in most departments, just because the economy's changing and as well. But I'm thinking when the master plan comes down, I don't know if this is included in your master plan analysis, but do we anticipate with the new home hardening laws and codes that are coming down from CAL FIRE in the state, as well as the new projects and the danger zones that we have that we might not be able to be in compliance with, do we anticipate that we will be needing to use more of a fire prevention than we're able to handle internally, that therefore will we have to pay more contractually? Is there an analysis of maybe we might need to use more training for our personnel as well to accommodate this new law and these new codes?
Great question. One of two ways. If we don't have the staff in-house, then yes, contractually, that price will go up, just to the needs. However, I anticipate that the master plan will substantiate my thoughts and claims on where we're going to have to go, and that may be additional full-time personnel that are completely staffed in basically fire prevention, to be accessible to the community 40 hours a week, to providing prevention education, and to take charge of that program and make sure to become compliant with all regulations, especially those that are anticipating to be coming in 2025 with new CAL FIRE mapping.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just, I think we all here understand the master plan, but just for those watching or those in the audience who maybe missed when we talked about that before, just give a 30-second overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about the public safety master plan.
Absolutely. Basically, just to kind of summarize it up as you requested, public safety master plan is going to serve as a strategic roadmap for guiding budgetary decisions, optimizing resource allocation, managing risks, engaging the community, and measuring performance. Integrating the priorities and objectives outlined in the master plan into the projected budget helps ensure that public safety needs are addressed comprehensively and efficiently. So basically, we're going to be looking at, again, performance measures, community, we're going to have community engagement, at least in the fire side on our master plan. There isn't another town hall component to it. It probably will be virtually. But we'll take a look at risk management type of issues, cost containment, resource allocation, and then definitely strategic planning, which will help us prioritize some of the needs, which, again, ties into the budget, and it'll all just be, what do we see, what the report or what the plan comes out with as our same priorities, do they match? But it would also potentially look at some different modeling for us, other ways of cost recovery. It's going to be an all-inclusive. Also, our plan will also be a community risk assessment as well. So there's 3 plans in the master plan is one of on the fire side. So hopefully that summarizes it a little bit.
Yeah, and to clarify, that's being done by a third-party expert, so that when you say the report will validate what your sense is of what the needs of the department are, this is someone who's skilled and experienced and expert in this type of assessment, so they can tell us what they think we need, both legally and both given the parameters of our community?
Correct. We went out for a request for a proposal on ours, at least on the fire side. I'm pretty sure the police department did as well. We have a very reputable organization that they do this for a living. The fire side, the one that we went with, they have retired fire personnel chiefs throughout the state and the country, as well as specialty people with special finance folks that can talk the language with our finance director and such. So it'll be very comprehensive and very detailed, and should give us a great roadmap, as I spoke to, on the future, and help us prioritize the importance of moving forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you let us know when we did change from a professional firefight department from our previous volunteer and then our mixed volunteer paid, thank you, combination department, what was your budget prior and what was your budget now?
The Budget now is 3.6 million, and prior to that, before I became chief, I'm just going to be off the top of my head, but I would say it was closer to the 1.5 million. And again, that would be a guesstimate on my behalf, because I didn't study the budget back then. But it is a significant increase from the volunteer days, absolutely, and even the combination days. As you can see, finance director showed we had 4 full-time personnel, and now we're at 17.
We've talked a lot about contracting out, so while I have you, I remember the time when we decided to move from volunteer to professional, in part because, and the other alternative being to eliminate our fire department and contract with the county. My understanding is that the financial cost of that has increased significantly since we had those discussions, probably 6 or 7 years, 8 years ago. I don't know if you have a sense now what our alternative is in terms of if we were to, find the master plan to be more comprehensive and more expensive than we think we can handle. What would our alternative be?
That's a great question, and in my personal opinion, there is no alternative, to be honest with you. The rates that I've received from LA County Fire currently are $6.6 million. That's $3 million above our budget right now. And you will not get the same services. You will probably just pretty much get an engine and a squad, which is for the squad will be your EMS component, and they will contract with private ambulance. So not only will you be paying $3 million more, you're losing the cost recovery of the transports, the EMS transports, because that's going to go to the private ambulance. Prior to that, as most folks know, we did an assessment with the city of Arcadia as well. And at that point in 2019, it was $3.1 million, which is just $500,000 short of where we're at now, and I'm sure that's substantially higher at this point. So again, in my personal opinion, there really are no options. For us to stay full service and have local control of our own agencies and our own departments, it's still going to be cheaper to move forward.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that 3.1 million was just fire services, correct? Not EMS?
That is correct. It was just fire services. We were still going to run our own EMS component. So there would have been additional costs to that as well.
Any other questions while we have Chief Bartlett? And then I'll bring the finance director back up.
Sure. So I think history is important when we're looking, especially when we're looking forward to what's going on and kind of where we are now. If you don't mind, kind of going back to when we went from just a regular EMT to life-saving services, and that's when the original UT kind of came around to help fund that. And generally, I think it wasn't full-time employees. We were having part-time employees, and we were budgeting for that rather than having full-time, because we only had 4 full-time. Maybe they were full-time. What was your recollection back then?
Correct. The UUT at that time, at least on the fire side, and I'll speak to that, it was to bring about the paramedic program. Prior to that, we had EMTs, which is basic life support. Paramedics are advanced life support. Basically can do hospital type of care in the field before pre-hospital.
So it was rush someone to the hospital as quick as you can versus trying to save someone's life in the field. And then get them to the hospital.
Correct, and as an EMT and part of that model when we had it, it was pretty much what we used to refer to as load and go. The only thing we can really do is first aid type of stuff, oxygen, if you will, and that was pretty much it. But now all treatments are done in the field to stabilize our patients before we transport. We're able to contact the base hospital and get medical advice to treat in the field. And so the service that we're now providing through advanced life support is far superior to what we were providing before.
Can you dig a little bit deeper on that? Can you give us a little bit more detail of kind of what are some of those things that a paramedic can do that an EMT can't? I get the idea of a load and go, but give us some examples of what a paramedic can do, what kind of treatments and treatments and processes or aid that they can give.
Yes, I will do my best as a non-paramedic.
I believe there
And
may
I
be
do
a
have one
paramedic
behind
class
me
too.
that will
Yeah.
probably shake his head and yes or no to confirm. But some of the advanced life support services that we can provide as paramedics, definitely one are to administer narcotics in the field. So that can be anything to help with heart attacks, seizures, and you know, some of the things that are definitely could have adverse effects if we don't have that ability in the field. They can do EKGs to see what's happening, intubation, just a gamut of things that they can do in the field that are life-saving skill sets.
You got a nod of approval.
And he walked back to his seat. Kudos to you.
Jake Knapp here is probably one of our best paramedics, and that's not taking anything away from anybody else, but he's absolutely outstanding. So since the implementation of the paramedic service, we can definitely highlight some of the what we would refer to as some saves that we've been able to do that we would have never have been able to accomplish as EMTs, and again that's through the advancement in the service.
So kind of carrying on this theme, so we went from just EMTs to life-saving, and then we had a sunsetting of the UUT. This is probably outside your scope, but in 2016, sunsetted to 8%. We're going to have about a $500,000 shortfall back then. Had it sunset to 6%, we would have been over $1 million shortfall. Okay, so, but we're still pretty much a combination fire department, EMTs and a whole bunch of volunteers.
Correct.
So then we approve that financing for the general fund, but we continue, and now we're at 17 full-time opposed to 4?
17 full-time, two administrative, which includes myself, and then 15 operational.
And there was no other funding that occurred between 2016 and today, a new tax or anything like that didn't occur for?
Yes, to kind of summarize your question, the UUT was initiated on the fire side to bring in the paramedic program, and that only. At that time, we were not full-time. So since the inception of the full-time career department, it is basically, well, you know, off the general fund. There is no other additional funding resource for it.
And I think Director Guerrero Leon mentioned that the UUT only increased by like 3%, almost 3% on average. So I'm assuming our budget during those years increased greater than 3% on average to where we are now.
Substantially, yes.
Okay. I think that might be all I have for Chief.
I have one more for Chief.
Sure, please.
Can you tell us some of the unique services that our fire department offers that would likely not be part of other services? What can we do? What do we do that, say, the city of Arcadia or the county wouldn't do?
Quite simply, as Director Knob said, just some of the services that we provide. We partner with the Y for stuff that's coming up, fire prevention festivals that we do, May 11th where we're going to be doing open house, the Easter egg hunts, the Santa Claus visits, just the gamut of things that make Sierra Madre, that both the police department and the fire department, you know, we're part of the fabric of this community. I don't believe you're going to get that from any other agency that you might want to contract with or would bring in. They're going to provide the service, and that's it.
How about some of the programs that we're looking at, like some of the brush programs, you know, bringing in the state and others and looking at high hazard areas and the ability to reduce fuel loads? Can you talk a little bit about kind of what our team is doing, what we may not see from a city or another city or county?
Well, I believe for me it's more of almost the ship analogy. Being a smaller agency, We have the ability to maneuver quickly. We have the ability to build relationships a lot easier. And so we've done that, reaching out to, you know, basically, for lack of a better term, the bigger brother through LA County and CAL FIRE to help us assess some of our stuff, especially as you refer to our wildland areas, the interface, and looking at how to mitigate some issues, potential issues that could be coming up, as we all are aware of, through fuel reduction, home hardening, and the like. So, you know, we're also working with CAL FIRE to basically utilize some of the systems and platforms that they have for inspection processes, and basically mirroring what they're utilizing as well. So we're able to definitely partner with those folks, but having the local knowledge as well about Sierra Madre and the nuances that we have here, we're able to take those and overlap them and make them work for our community.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Bartlett? Thank you so much.
So on,
Go ahead.
on
sorry.
that, kind of on that theme, so, and I probably already know the question the answer to this question, right? So, let's say we had to, because of finances, contract with LA County, and you said we'd lose life saving and probably just get EMT service, and we'd only get like one squad or whatever it was that you said. But let's say as policymakers, probably a different council then, or city management, we don't like the policies of the way they're doing things. Can we talk to brass and say, hey, can you change the way you do things? Is that typical with contract cities? Do they have some, because I know obviously when we're autonomous, if chief, you're doing a bad job, well, we can let you know, right? We haven't had to, thankfully, but do we have that type of service with the county?
It's a great question. And if I may, just a little point of clarification. If we were to contract with county or look at that option, you would still get advanced life support services.
Okay.
It would just look a little different. That squad will have paramedics on it. The transport would go basically through the ambulance, the private ambulance, which will most likely be EMTs. The squad with the medics kind of follow up. So it's back to the emergency 51 days with Johnny and Roy. Same type of scenario. However, you're absolutely right. You would be relinquishing a lot of local control, and the community would be doing the same.
So if city manager was having a problem with one of the employees, we're kind of stuck, right? With who we get.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Lowe?
To follow up on that then, if we did ever contract with another entity, can you tell me what LA County's response times are compared to our response times?
Great question. There's a lot of variables in that, to be honest with you. They would put an engine most likely in the station, but then again, that's another Pandora's box to open up, because you would have to retrofit that station that we currently house to their standards. That's above the $6.6 million that they're asking for. Who knows what that's going to be. And once they find that acceptable, then they'll put their equipment in there. Their response times might be very comparable to ours, to be honest with you, because they would be in the city. That's if they're not somewhere else. Maybe they do a move up to Lancaster, Palmdale, I don't know, right? Maybe they're in training or something, and you're going to get, 44 engine 244 or 44 from over in the Doherty area, or you may even get as close as engine 5 over in on Rosemead Boulevard by the boat. That is a delay, but those are the next closest resources that you would get from county if the actual engine that they put in here was not here.
So our automatic aid would change?
There would be a different automatic aid agreement, absolutely.
So my question then, when we had to talk about retrofitting, that just brought up another question then. Our station, we moved over in 1976 to the station we're at now from across from the bottle shop. And we've never had firefighters live there until what year? About 2015, I'm guessing.
It would have been around 2008 when we implemented the paramedic program. We converted and basically put some dorms or sleeping.
How many
areas.
bedrooms is that dorm? How many bedrooms there's upstairs in your dorm?
We currently have 2 that house.
And how many people spend the night there?
We have 5 currently.
Do you know the square footage? Or maybe planning knows the square footage?
One of them is a 2 full-size beds in there, and they're pretty tight. The other one has 4 full-size beds in there. Square footage, I'd be taking a guess, but it's
about
small.
To
600?
follow up on that, in other fire stations, how is the lodging accommodations? How is the sleeping arrangements there?
They vary from station to station. As we move into the future, you'll find a lot of single dorms, mostly for mental health and wellness, to be honest with you. It gets the firefighters their own space to kind of decompress and get ready for the next call, along with, it removes them from the snorers, if you will, right, so they can get a good night's sleep.
I heard stories about some of those.
Yeah, so it's changed. You'll still find some departments or some stations that have not made the retrofits or what have you, and you'll see some that still are similar to ours, but the future has different regulations and requirements.
Did the master plan accommodate that as well?
It will. We'll be taking a look at everything we're doing.
Oh, great.
The facilities, the equipment, the apparatus, the service that we provide, the models. It's going to look at everything.
I'm guessing that's going to be another expense.
It's going to be something that I'm sure is going to show up. And again, as I mentioned, it'll be, what are we going to prioritize? Are we going to address the findings of the plan, if you will? It'll be there. I'm very confident of it.
I think we are actually done now. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you
And I'm
very
sure
much.
folks have other questions for the finance director. So who would like to start there?
I can go.
Sure. Mayor Protem.
What is our reserve policy?
Thank you, council member. So our reserve policy is in line with best practices, and it's only for one time. The guidelines are that only for one-time expenditures that don't increase operating expenditures, and the reason why is because it's not a sustainable solution.
So if we were to use reserves for the 25-26 budget year, would that be violating our policy for reserves?
Yes, it would. It wouldn't be in line with our reserve policy.
Got it. Thank you. What percentage of our budget goes to salaries?
Around 71%.
71%. So if we cut back everything else in the city, we still have 71% all going to salaries. So if we're going to try to fill the 28, 29, $2 million shortfall, can we do that without cutting personnel?
Again, we go line by line, zero-based budgeting, and at a 1.4 million, we're talking cutting personnel.
I have a follow-up question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Can I ask a follow-up question with that? When we prioritize personnel and prioritize budgets, I know personally, just from being part of public safety, you have to offer utilities, you have to offer basic water, power, you have to offer public safety. So you can't have furlough days, you can't have days off with a fire or police department. And when someone dials 911, someone has to show up. So when we prioritize budgets, if we're doing personnel, which departments most likely are the ones that get cut? Or which are the...
Councilmember Lowe, so to answer your question, those are really strategic questions that require council input, staff input, community input, where we can prioritize what the current council's priorities are, and then we can make that decision at that point. In the past, I can say for the past 5 to 7 years, we prioritize public safety, public works, and community services. Those are all very important to this community. But those can change with council and with community needs. But definitely, public works and public safety are among the top priorities for any community.
Mayor Pro Tem.
How do our salaries compare to our similar cities?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would defer that question to our Assistant City Manager.
In doing a preliminary, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. In doing a preliminary study in-house on the positions, we're looking at somewhere between 15 to 50% below market within the agencies that we look at through our compensation philosophy, the 11 cities that we've determined that are like Sierra Madre.
I'm sorry, let me just get that back. 15 to 50%? That means someone can walk out the door here and double their salary?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? When you give that range, what does that represent? That represents particular positions or?
Particular positions,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, we look at every position, and there are higher level positions, lower level positions, and that the range will, that's the discrepancy.
So not every employee could go out and make twice as much. It's certain positions, but there, we do have positions that someone could double their salary walking out the door here.
That is correct.
Okay. I think my next set of questions go to you as well. Do we have department heads that are making less than their employees currently?
Not at the moment.
Tell me more. Are we close to it? Is it a concern for the future? We're here looking at a forecast. Is that something that you're concerned about or that you see on the horizon?
It is a concern moving forward as we negotiate with our respective unions. Those salaries increase, and for management level positions, there has been no cost of living increases for over 7 years. So we start looking at compaction when we increase through negotiations with our bargaining groups, and that becomes a concern, and we have to start looking at management level positions and comparisons with the market within our agencies that we look at. And so, yes, it is a concern that we are addressing at the moment, and we're but moving forward, it will be a major concern.
I want to go back to something else you said. So for the past 7 years, there's been no cost of living adjustment for any of our management employees.
That is correct.
Okay. So if we were to adjust salaries so you don't have a manager making less than their employee in the future, kind of in this time frame that we're looking at, in this 5-year time frame, do we have an estimate of what cost that would be, and is that in our projections that you presented to us tonight?
It's not in the projections, but with the in-house study that we're doing with the comparisons for within the market, if we were to make an adjustment within this next fiscal year, you're looking at potentially a over $300,000 increase in the budget for payroll.
So in the 24-25 budget year, if we were to do a COLA increase for managers and make sure that managers are being paid equivalent or more to their own employees, it's going to cost the city another $300,000 that isn't in the presentation that we've got.
That is correct.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I add?
Please.
So the internal study that we did was for a 10% increase to mid-management, and it's a one-time $300 impact to the general fund, and we haven't done the long-term projections. And that doesn't bridge the gap with the 40 and 50% employees that are below market.
So the 300,000 we could consider is more of a floor than a ceiling.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. I think my last question is for our finance director.
Let's see if anybody else has questions
Sure.
for Assistant City Manager.
So in my occupation as a forensic economist, I see a lot of earnings of public sector, municipalities, cities, counties, whatever. And generally, like a starting level person that works for a city or a county or state is much lower than the private sector when they come in. A lot of places have what we call step increases, and they're usually annual and they're usually always given. Here in our city, it's my understanding we have merit-based increases, and you have to have a good review in order to get a merit-based increase in lieu of just those automatic steps. So if, I think just for maybe the council and the public, could you tell us about how salary schedules work in concert with merit increases and the bargained cost of living adjustments, just so we can have an understanding of how maybe someone earlier in their career has kind of larger as a percentage of their salary increases, but then as you kind of get toward the end of your career, generally, it's my understanding it's a smaller percentage increase as you kind of go forward.
Yes, that's a very good question. So the city looks at the salary matrix, the compensation salary matrix that we have that's adopted by City Council. And there's different levels. We have our classifications, our bargaining groups, and then we have management. The cost of living adjustments are done through negotiations. However, those are when those are adopted, those are instant. And also in the future, if we're negotiating a 3-year contract, for example, there's a built-in negotiated cost of living adjustments. The merit-based adjustments are done annually through a performance evaluation procedure. Every year, we have a step system. We have 1 through 5 or 1 through 10, depending on the classification. And through the merit system, the employee would receive a meets or exceeds standard evaluation in order to be eligible for a step increase. And those step increases ranges from 2.5% to 5%.
So there's the merit-based, and then we'll have future schedules that have the cost of living adjustments fed into those merit-based increases as well.
That is correct.
So it's almost like two raises potentially to keep up with. Is it to keep up with cost of living and also to basically it's like a semi-promotion or giving you a little bit of a
correct. The negotiation is to stay within the market, to keep with our cities that we look at, but the merit increase is based on performance, and we look at that very closely, and the reviews are reviewed by myself and multiple and other individuals before it goes to the employee. So it really is focused on the performance of the employee, which incentivizes the employee to perform well in order to be eligible to receive that merit increase. Now, there comes a time where the employee has reached the top step, and at that point, the evaluation or the performance evaluation will continue to occur. However, because they've reached the top step, there will be no merit increase. And in that situation, through the bargaining process, cost of living adjustments will make that, the employee will receive the cost of living adjustment at that time.
That's why at the end, the increases overall tend to be smaller.
That's correct, yes.
And can you mentioned negotiations with the 3 bargaining units, the police, fire, and CEA. Have most of those recent negotiations been really kind of focused on, would you say retention, or kind of getting them, I guess part of retention would be getting them to market. Mm-hmm. But would you say retention has been a big focus? Because I know policy-wise we've been wanting that. Yes.
As one of our strategic goals, retention has been a priority for management to retain our qualified staff. As you heard Chief Bartlett talk about the amazing staff that we have in our fire department, but that goes for our police department, our public works, utilities, our administrative, our IT. We have a lot of very qualified individuals, and so yes, we prioritize that for retention, but in order to meet and stay competitive through the bargaining process, we come to an agreement that is reasonable, feasible for the city, but reasonable for the membership of the respective unions.
And you as assistant city manager wear a couple hats. One of them is, I believe, the director of human resources, and then also risk management issues and things like that.
Right.
So if we're having a lot of turnover, I'm assuming your focus is on the HR portion of not just taking care of the current employees, but hiring and recruiting, and you're not able to focus more on the other tasks that you have. Is that?
That is correct. That is one of the things that not just myself, but other department heads who are experiencing vacancies within their department, who have to take on additional assignments to make sure that the day-to-day operations are functioning, which at some point can create a concern, and which we look at closely. And so recruitment is an important part of, and we review when we have vacancies. We review the vacancy, the need for the position, and we make an evaluation at that point whether we need to continue recruitment or hold off on it for a while, or depending on the level of whether it's a middle management level or entry level, we look at that as well. But yeah, we take a look at that closely, but it does create more work for department heads.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia, if I may add, we talked about retainment, but as we saw in the past 2 years, recruitment is a huge component of the bargaining process. After our last bargaining with the Fire Association, we were able to now recruit and have very competitive recruitments. When in the past we would have a recruitment and have less than 10 people apply and less than that show up for interviews, and now we have highly qualified people applying, and we're able to retain our highly qualified staff. So it's both recruitment and retainment.
That's helpful. And I do recall seeing a photograph of maybe like 20 candidates for firefighters, which we would never have before, in the Sierra Madre room, I'd say. Thank you to the Y for letting us use it for those purposes. But yeah, I do recall, we usually didn't see that, and we did see a huge recruitment to get us closer to fully staffed, right?
And actually, in fact, fully staffed.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask that? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a follow-up question about the retention as well as recruiting. So once someone who's lived and worked in Sierra Madre with my family for generations and years, and my friends all have, it used to be in the past that we would have to have people that loved our town so much to stay living here, because all of our employees would get offers from other cities if they were, doing outstanding jobs, of course. And it's hard to retain them because it gets to that level where it's not just the love, but can we survive? Can our firefighters, our police officers not have 500 jobs, or, I'm exaggerating, of course, but have extra jobs? And now that we've come to a level where we're more competitive, and that's only going to increase in the future, and we see other cities losing a lot of employees. I don't think it's just us. I see it across, the state of California, especially with cost of living increases. What are our plans for the future for being able to stay competitive? I mean, we said that we're not analyzing increases in our matrices for salaries, but we only have the merit levels increasing. So why? I mean, there are estimates for how much COLA will go up in at least the next year, the year after that. Why don't we project that?
That's a very good question, and that's something that we are looking at as well. To the point that you made about working in Sierra Madre, we look at quality of life as well. And I think quality of life in employment is very important. And I think we have that here in Sierra Madre. We have quite a few employees that have been here for quite some time. And I think a big part of that is because of the quality of life. And now to stay competitive, we have to look at the market. We are considering perhaps a comprehensive total compensation study that includes salaries and benefits, that will include not only other agencies, but the nonprofit and the medical field in terms of administrative type positions. So we are looking at those types of studies to help us determine what the growth looks like, what the future looks like in terms of personnel. It'll help us guide, similar to the Public Safety Master Plan, it'll help us guide how the long-term goals will be and how we can keep those goals within the strategic plan that we have as well.
But to clarify, just on that point that Councilmember Lowe made, the projections presented tonight do include a 7% projected increase in payroll, which I assume includes part of the matrix, not wholesale changes that you were just talking about in terms of lifting a whole group or a whole category, but in terms of just what we expect in terms of merit increases and COLA over this period, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I just want to clarify.
I had a couple follow-ups that occurred to me as we've been talking. One is, do we have an idea of our turnover rate in the city? Any kind of horseshoes and hand grenades, rough things, and how it compares to other places?
We've recently did a turnover rate, and it varies because as time goes on, that percentage changes. I don't have the data at the moment. What we currently have, because we've had some recent vacancies within the city just recently from last year into the first of the year, and we've had some recruitments. So the data has completely changed, but that's something that we could present in the near future that can highlight the overall the retention and the turnover rate.
Okay, great. I understand that we may have some folks that are working multiple jobs in order to be able to work here.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe one of them is in the room that I think he's spoken to us before that had to work 2 or 3 jobs to be able to make ends meet. Do we know how many employees we've got, or do we know kind of how common that is for some of our employees?
We do have, there's part of the process is the employees would have to get approval to be able to work outside of Sierra Madre. And we have at least 7 employees that are working outside of Sierra Madre when they're off. Sierra Madre being their primary responsibility. If an emergency were to happen, they would have to respond here. But we do have at least 7 that we know of that have had approval through their department to work outside of their employment with Sierra Madre.
Thank you for that. I also understand that we do have some employees that choose to leave other positions that would pay them more to come to Sierra Madre. Is that right? Because kind of the flip side of things is people leave kind of other departments to come here. Have you, as the HR director, heard of, as you were doing recruitment, what have you heard about why people come here? If they're, they're making 15, 20, 30% less, why would you want to come to Sierra Madre?
Good question. I have not heard any comments other than...
If you would like, there may be someone in the room that might be willing to speak to that.
I would love for them to come up and speak to that, please.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I just wanted to give the opportunity.
Just our recent recruitment, and you were introduced to a few of our newest members last council session. We were able to do just as you spoke. There was one of our newest firefighter paramedics took a pay cut from his previous agency to come here, and that is for the quality of life, the balance between work life, and some of the agencies definitely do a lot more calls than we do, and it takes a toll on them. So that's an enticing thing for some of our folks. But as city manager said, we had to get that carrot out there as well, though, and bringing our salaries up definitely helped, along with the work-life balance. So in our department alone, I know we've had that.
And PD.
Councilor Berlow would like to put someone on the spot.
My childhood friend.
Good evening, Council. I just happen to be one of those individuals. I can speak just from a personal level and tell you that the city here is just that much more unique. It's quality of life. It has a lot to offer, and especially for what I do as an officer. But I believe there's a balance, and I think that's really where perhaps part of the discussions that's taking place right now is about. We have a lot to offer here at this police department with this city, but it does come with its challenges. I have seen in the one of the stories I often tell is in the 7 years that I've been here, I have seen more people vacate our police department here than in the 25 years I served at my other agency, and that was including retirements. So I think the challenge and the goal is to maybe find that balance, because we certainly have something here that is appealable.
Thank you. Any other questions for Assistant City Manager? I actually just had one question in terms of this comprehensive study that you were mentioning. One of the things I was thinking of when you were speaking, as well as in my own experience, one of the things that's not often understood when we're talking about increasing salaries and people sort of see it as a pure cost. What they're not factoring in is the cost of the savings of retention versus the cost of recruitment. So I'm wondering if we were to go ahead and have an independent study, if that could be a component, because I do think sometimes that gets lost, that providing an increased salary or benefits to our existing folks seems expensive, but sometimes we're comparing it to what they're getting now, but not comparing it to what it would cost to replace them with someone brand new, both in terms of the recruitment cost itself as well as sort of the lost time that you were mentioning, folks spending on recruitment. And I'm wondering if, I'm sure that can be quantified. And so it would be good, I think, when we talk sometimes about these matrix changes, to have a little bit of, it doesn't have to be precise, but just a little bit of a ballpark of like what the comparable, failure to provide the increase would require, sort of X dollars or a range of dollars to fill spots because people will leave because we're not competitive.
Yes, good question, Mayor. The total compensation study that we are considering will include the retention and the savings of retaining our qualified staff and compared to what it costs to recruit. And I'll give an example of that, and I'll use our fire department for that, and even police, but our fire department, when there is a vacancy, you think that recruitment is, you just recruit, you hire, and they start working. There is a process for our public safety in order to start on their first day. And not only the staff time, but the recruitment, the advertising, and then you get to the interview, and then you get to a pre-employment process, which includes a psychological evaluation, a polygraph, which our police department does. We do a comprehensive background check on those individuals, and then we have equipment that is required for them to have before they get started. That adds up to close to $15,000 per person, and that's before they begin working in the city. So when you look at that cost and you have 3 or 4 vacancies, that's a huge expense that we're looking at that could be used for other things if our efforts and everything that we're doing to retain, we would be able to use that on other things, whether it's personnel or equipment and so forth. So, but yes, that's an example that I can give that highlights the expense of recruitment.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to when we do these matrix evaluations, to just have a sense of like what the comparable is, because it's not compared to zero, it's compared to another cost.
Yes.
And I'm sure we could look at that in our last few years of going through having professional new firefighters and law enforcement, and how much we've also paid in their training and their professional development, their courses and all their certifications and all the miles and everything it takes to do that. And then you add that to the 15,000, and then we can calculate how many we've lost, and then they've gone to other departments.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good question there.
And they're still responding on our calls because they're in Pasadena and Arcadia.
Well, good, then some of that training's coming back. Any other questions for Assistant City Manager? Okay, I will open it up for any other questions for our Finance Director, or are we ready to have?
I had one more for the Finance Director.
Okay, thank you.
And so, what I'd like to know is kind of looking forward, if we look at the rate of our expenses and our rate of our revenues, can you give us kind of, over the next couple of years, what's the rate of increase in our expenses and what's the rate of increase in our revenues, and how do those compare?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for your questions. So for revenue, we see about 3% overall increase in revenues each year as a trend, and expenditures is more around 5 to 7%.
So the expenditures, so we see diverging lines that continue to diverge. It's 3% increase in revenue, you said, and 5% increase in expenses.
Correct.
Every year going out into the future. So that gap is only going to get wider based on where we're at right now.
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm going to assume that those projections have changed, right? Because we've been doing, what do we say, less with less for quite some time, and those lines have stayed, relatively close together. We haven't had this divergence like you're showing in the graph. What would you attribute the change from the last few years where we've even enjoyed a surplus? I know there were some things during the pandemic that we were able to save and then had to sort of go back. And so if you could just sort of explain why we've come to this point versus, the relative calm financial situation we've had for the last few years.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we've had some one-time revenues that has happened, one-time savings and expenditures for the pandemic response, as mentioned. Also, a couple years back too, we did prepayments to our pension, and that reduced, for example, it's, to put into perspective, it's like a $1 million annual pension contribution, and because of the prepayment that we did, it went down to under $400,000. That does continue to change. It has variables to it as a long-term expenditure, but that's just something too. And also sales tax, Measure S. So back before that, it was around 400K sales tax, and now it's 1.4 because of the Measure S.
Thank you.
We doubled that.
So, yeah, so and that is why those are some of the factors that's why we didn't see it earlier on the deficit.
Well, and presumably our expenses, I assume, are increasing at a higher rate than it has been historically because of everything that we're seeing everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, I think when it went from 1%, we got the extra 0.75 that was available. So yes. I guess conceivably it doesn't double, but the way prices moved, I guess it more than doubled. So, just looking at the employment cost index, it's published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. We're looking at like 5% increases for state and local agencies on the employment cost index side of things. And we don't only pay for personnel, we buy stuff. We don't consume like a household does, but you still need to buy things other than pay for personnel, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And so we saw inflation in 2022, 4.5%, 2023 of 8%, and over 4% last year. Aside from the personnel costs, which is like 70, I think you said 70% of our overall costs, did we see our increases in supplies and just overall paying for services that come in increase as well, kind of in concert with the consumer price index?
Yes, we have seen it, and even going through the budget process now, we've seen increases based on just doing operations. And for the projections, we use 2.5% each year, but it's going up, so that is the minimum expenditure.
Yeah. I mean, overall consumer price index, personally, I consider it to be like 2.25% for a long term, but we've had high inflation for the past few years. Doesn't help when you're projecting 2.25 or 2.5 and you get hit with an 8%. I think that has to be another contributing factor to where we were versus where we are now. And like you said, some of the reasons we saved kind of on the expense side, not only were they one-time expenses, but as you recall, we also were able to find projects, or were able to use our reserves within certain reserve categories to pay for like one-time expenses as well, which wasn't a drain on our revenue source, right?
Yes, correct.
Just a couple like cleanup questions I have. License and fees and permits. A lot of that's isn't it supposed to be recovery, not a revenue source to pay for all the operations of the city, but just recovery for the purposes of doing like a plan check or a business license?
Yes, that revenue type is cost recovery. So we see an expenditure on corresponding expenditure with it. It's not something above and beyond revenue source.
Okay, so
just to expand on that. So, would we be able to increase those fees if we wanted to?
We are limited to the actual cost of providing that service.
Are we limited by law that we can't increase those fees above cost recovery?
I would defer to our attorney.
The answer is yes, and we can always increase the cost, but we'd have to do a new cost of service study to justify that cost increase.
Okay, so we can't just, if we want to try to increase our revenues, say, well, we're going to increase all of our fees and permits and all of that. We'd have to do a full analysis of it and understand what the actual cost is, and it's actually a cost of service model as required in the state.
Correct.
Okay.
Just to piggyback on that, do the projections actually contemplate an increase in? I mean, because obviously we've seen an increase in the service expense side. I mean, we just have because of the an increase in salaries for folks and increase in supplies and all of that. So did you factor into the increase in revenue an increase in that source of revenue as well, or is that still just pending the study that we're undergoing?
So at the mid-year projections, it was not included because we're still undergoing the user fee study.
Mayor, if I may add that staff intends to bring that fee study to council on May 28th of this year.
Great, thank you. Did you have more?
No, I think Ed,
I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but thinking about our personnel costs or even department costs, I know that historically police has been a pretty large portion of our overall budget. It's kind of hard to compare fire because the whole department has changed considerably. Now we have a professional fire department, but as far as the percentage of our overall expenses relative to police, relative to everything, have you seen it growing, shrinking, staying about the same through time, or I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but have you done that analysis, and do you have an understanding of that?
I do not have the numbers in front of me.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's all I have.
I just have one question, and I know with the caveat that the city manager gave earlier that obviously anything drastic, any major decisions would have to be, council-driven, community-driven, taking a lot into account. But I mean, just to quantify for people, I mean, if we're talking about I'm sorry, I'm getting back to the right page. If we're talking about a $1.4 million shortfall, projected for fiscal year 27-28, and we just talked about how we, as a city, we are obligated to provide, basic public safety, certainly the utility. What, in terms of the way that the budget is so heavily skewed towards personnel, I think the finance director noted that once we get to that $1.4 million, there's no way to reduce costs beyond without looking at personnel. So, I mean, in terms of just quantifying what a $1.4 to $2 million deficit and cuts look like, I mean, is there any way to just quantify what that is? I mean, in terms of what would that mean in terms of our public safety personnel or a particular department, or, you know, I just want to give both the council and the public a sense of like what that looks like from an actual on the ground perspective.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So around 1.4 million deficit, we're looking at about 10 police officers or 10 firefighters. So that can put it into perspective as well.
But that's about half the department. I mean, and we probably then couldn't maintain
a fire department. But so those probably wouldn't be the cuts. So where else would we prospectively look at cuts?
So we would look at personnel costs would be the equivalent of a fully burdened police officer. And just to put in perspective also, like the library budget, $700,000, community services budget is $400,000. So you're talking about two complete departments. But the biggest impact on cost reduction would come in staff. So we would be looking at the equivalent of the fully burdened police officer positions or fire department positions, and that's 10 positions.
I might have a couple more follow-up questions, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, no, of course.
So we're talking about revenue sources and expenditures and trying to balance those. And I, again, probably know the answer because I just paid my second installment of my property tax. But as far as our property taxes are concerned, do we have any specific overall parcel taxes in the city that are Sierra Madre specific? Not talking about the school or the mosquito vector or all those other things we have little payments for. Do we have anything citywide currently that is burdening on our property tax bill for our residents?
We only have district assessments, but those
or an
are
overall
specific.
parcel tax?
Yeah, no.
Nothing. Do most cities have that, if you know?
I don't have the answer to that question,
Like,
but
do you know if Monrovia or Arcadia or these other?
Councilmember Garcia, I think what we've seen is it's common for municipalities that are largely reliant on property tax revenue, such as a South Pasadena or San Marino, to have a additional tax to help offset the gaps in the budget.
And we currently do not have one.
And we currently do not have one.
Okay. And, you know, I probably should have done this research, but as far as, and maybe it doesn't exist, and maybe you've, in your financial roundtables with other finance directors or conferences, you've heard of any of this, but one would think that if you have your own autonomous fire and police and city, and you're always touted as being one of the safest cities in the state or the nation. If we went to a contract city with maybe not as many services and maybe not as safe and maybe other issues, has there been any studies regarding the value of home prices? Like, do the value of home prices, as an economist, I would think, yes, after word got out, home prices would reduce, therefore the wealth of our citizens would then have a reduction as well. Have you seen any or heard any studies of that? Or even disincorporation, going from an incorporated city with autonomy to a county city, what happens to the home prices when that occurs?
So I don't have that.
Another gotcha, I'm sorry.
But it just, I thought about the parcel tax question, your previous question. San Marino does have a public safety special tax.
Okay.
And that one, it generates about 3.4 million for that city. Just remembered.
Thank you. I think I've exhausted you and exhausted the questions. Sorry for some of the gotchas.
You're an economist. You should go do the study.
I should study. Research, right?
Yeah.
There's a new research project.
I don't think the contract cities would welcome that research. Any more questions? Thank you so much, and thank you for entertaining everyone, all of staff for entertaining all of, I think this was a really important discussion, and I really appreciate the preparation and thought that went into this. Your initial presentation was so good and so clear, and I'm hopeful that folks watching, were able to follow along with the slides, and hopefully the slides are available, as part of our packet tonight, because I do think it's a really important overview and background on sort of the basics of our financial system and our sources and uses of funds. So thank you very much for all the work that you did to this, and thanks to all the city staff who was here to answer all of our questions.
Thank you.
Do we need to take a break?
Do we want to do any, we did questions. Is there any need to do discussion, or, up to you, Madam Mayor?
Well, if we're going to do discussion, we should do public comment.
It was also a presentation.
Right.
I know, but.
It's not agendized properly, I think,
Okay.
for discussion.
Okay, so,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so then, are we okay to just move on then? Okay. So I think we only have one approval item, and that's consent, and then we have one discussion item after that. So, Madam City Clerk, do you want to present the consent calendar for this evening?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Before the City Council this evening, there are 3 items for consideration on the consent calendar. Item A is the consideration of Resolution 24-25, and that's approving certain demands. The City Council is being asked to approve Resolution 24-25. Consent item B is a consideration of approval of increases for open purchase orders where the purchase order plus the increase exceeds $45,000 for fiscal year end 2023 through 2024. It is recommended that the City Council authorize the increases for those purchase orders. And then lastly, consent item C is the consideration of amendments to the Wildan Engineering Building Inspection, Plan Check Services, and Fire Building Services Professional Service Agreement. It is recommended that the City Council amend the current professional services agreement and extend the Wildan Engineering contract for 3 years, and authorize the City Manager to execute the amendment. Madam Mayor, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on item A, the warrants? Any questions on item B, the purchase order increase? Any questions on number 3, the extension of the Wildan contract?
Madam Mayor, just a quick clarification. That contract, that's all fee for service, right? It is based on the demand that we've got. That's what the contract is based on. Am I right on that one, or or am I confusing it with the prior item?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking.
I think it is. I think the answer is, I believe, yes.
You are correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes.
No.
This does another question regarding the same item. So I don't see fire marshal on there. Is that part of building, or is that going to be considered separately?
Fire marshal is on there.
Oh,
It's a separate agreement. So there are 2 agreements under consideration and 2 separate amendments.
I was looking at the matrix, and fire marshal was not in that portion.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And to further elaborate on your question, and for the response would be, there are things that the fire marshal does, and there are things that the building, not the building official, I'm
Plan
sorry.
check?
Inspector?
Not the
Code enforcer?
So many things.
What does Alan do again?
He is,
He's the building official. Thank you. As building official, they do code enforcement activities, and they help with ordinance drafting that wouldn't be part of cost recovery.
Okay. So there are some parts that are.
There are some aspects to this that would not be covered under cost recovery.
I do have a question as well. Continuing the theme of this evening, I assume as part of recommending the staff's recommendation to extend the contract, that there was an analysis as to whether or not the contracting out of these services was cost effective versus having internal staff, hiring additional internal staff to perform the same services.
Planning Manager Claire Lynn will respond.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for the question. So the question was the comparison between a hiring staff versus the contracted services. So our planning department currently has staff and it's complemented by the contracted services for building and safety. And it enhanced the process because with this percentage-based fee with our contracted services, we were able to be flexible and adaptable with the economy. So when there is a downturn of the economy, we do not burden the general fund with, the fully burdened staff. And with the upturn of the economy, we actually have a full access to an entire firm of expertise, like the fire marshal that has connection with the CAL FIRE. We're able to connect us with the Sacramento that we just experienced with our recently WUI issues. And also we have access to land surveyors that their stamp is recognized by LA County Recorder's Office, that we don't have to go through an extra process when we do subdivision maps. And also we have engineers that plan check for us from civil engineering to residential projects to commercial institutional projects. So those are the services that might not have if we have limited staff of employee.
That's very helpful, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I will open this up for public comment for items on the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, the city clerk's office did not receive any emails, nor do we have any speaker cards on this topic, on this agenda item.
Okay, seeing no public comment, I will bring it back for discussion, or if no discussion.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, great. And so we're on to our last item on the agenda, which is a discussion relating to conversion of our tennis courts at Sierra Vista Park from tennis to pickleball.
I believe Lauren Hines will present.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Krebs, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, and City Council members. So this evening I come before the City Council to ask that you authorize the court conversion at Sierra Vista Park from tennis courts to pickleball courts, and request that the City Council approve the project so that staff may seek and apply for qualifying funding sources. So over the course of the last several years, we've had members of the community come up and express their interest in additional pickleball courts within the city of Sierra Madre. And that prompted staff to start exploring the options of a full court conversion at our existing courts, which would be at Memorial Park as well as Sierra Vista Park. After gathering information and conducting a survey of both tennis and pickleball players to get a better understanding of the preferred park, preferred sport, and usage, with the numbers, of course, favoring Memorial Park, as that's where most of our pickleball players are used to playing. Staff was able to go ahead and prepare and submit a report to the Community Services Commission for the January 16th, 2024 meeting, outlining conversion options, which led the commission to consider several factors that included lighting, traffic, parking, court usage, and cost. The Community Services Commission assessed the various factors and the public comments at that meeting or during that meeting and meetings prior to that, during the January 16th and again other meetings, and made a motion to recommend that City Council approve the court conversion project at Sierra Vista Park while staff continues to research and identify qualifying sources, and Council may provide staff with additional recommendations if they so desire. So with that, I can hopefully answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I'll start. Oh, Gene.
Councilmember Goss?
Yeah, I thought I heard you qualify. Good report. I heard you qualify this as, according to the survey, pickleball players preferred Memorial Park, but that's where they're used to playing. They didn't play up at Sierra Vista Park?
So at this current time, we only have one designated court, well, two technically, in the Memorial Park tennis courts. Mm-hmm. So we do have some pickleball players that go to Sierra Vista and they will use chalk and they'll outline the lines or they'll put some tape down. But the ones that we do actually have designated is what gets the most traffic, and those are here in Memorial Park. So that at the time was the favored location.
What time of day generally do you see the highest traffic at Memorial Park and pickleball?
Memorial Park's highest traffic is generally in the morning and then in the evening. So there seems to be a little bit of a lull during the day. And during that time, staff has noticed very little or limited tennis players out on that court. But then it changes. We've got some tennis instructors have come in, and they've got the courts going as well. But the highest traffic for pickleball would be in the morning and in the evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there leagues? Do they reserve it? I mean, how is this, or do they first come, first serve? Like, how does this work?
So we do have some reservations. We do allow for court reservations at any of our tennis courts in town. So those are reserved, but it's also on a first come, first serve. So if nobody has reserved a time slot, anybody can come into the park and go ahead and play.
Can you tell me how that schedule is right now? Like, is it often reserved? Is it not? Is it set days? Like, I've never been there really.
It is reserved. It's definitely reserved throughout the week, in the mornings and in the evenings. So during the bulk of the afternoon, just about every day. During the bulk of the afternoon, there's really no reservations. We do have some tennis players that do reserve the tennis court after school, but for pickleball itself, it's generally in the morning and in the evening.
Do we have pickleball leagues?
Not that I'm aware of. At this point, it just seems that it is general public coming into play. There is talk of leagues wanting to form, but we don't currently have anything at this time that I'm aware of.
So I've left, City Hall occasionally and seen like 20 people. Like I love the enthusiasm, and I promise I'm going to try the sport because it looks so fun. See like 20 people in the court. Just thinking about Memorial Park Court and City Hall, and people come here to do city business. Has there been parking issues during those times for people to be able to find parking to do city business?
Yes. Unfortunately, when we've got a full court going, which again is a lot of fun.
We want to encourage it. Like it's great being active. 100% encourage it. But
yes, absolutely. We want to encourage it. We want people to, as the community services motto is, get out and get active.
Yeah.
So we do encourage that, but it does impact the ability for other members of the community to be able to come in and conduct business in our civic center.
Was that part of the thought regarding Sierra Vista versus Memorial?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And, we think about the weekends at Sierra Vista Park, a lot of baseball and softball and other activities. Are you finding, we talked about evenings and mornings, is it weekdays and weekends or primarily weekdays, or what have you seen as far as the peak times of playing on the days of the week, not just the times of the week?
So for me, the peak times that I've noticed, as I'm here usually Monday through Thursday, would be during the weekdays, mornings and evenings. I can't really speak to the weekends per se. I haven't witnessed it. I haven't been to the park to actually watch that take place, but I do feel that there is some heavy traffic, but I believe from what I've heard from community members that it is heavier during the week.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. So when this came before the Community Services Commission, how many times did it come before? And can you tell us a little bit about the community input? Did you get just a little, a lot, intermediate? Can you give me some concept of kind of the vetting that this has gone through with the Community Services Commission?
I will do my best, and then I will defer to Deputy City Manager Aguilar for clarification. We have had several meetings, and there was an enormous response from the community. So they have come out in both support of tennis as well as pickleball. But what we have noticed is that a lot of our pickleball players they're great. They enjoy the sport so much, but they want to see it grow in town. The 2 courts that we currently have does limit the amount of people that are able to come out and participate in this sport. And that's what we were hearing overwhelmingly from a lot of different people in different meetings. If there was a little bit more, or there were additional courts, then we'd be able to accommodate the number of people who wanted to come in and play. And that seemed to be a lot of what we were hearing. But I will, again, turn it over to Deputy City Manager for further clarification.
Thank you, Analyst Hines. Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, the current commission has agendized this topic and discussed it at least on two different occasions within the last 8 months. There has been high public comment at those meetings, and it's overwhelmingly in support of dedicated pickleball courts. The current group would like to extend the pickleball courts to 8 courts, which we don't feel we can accommodate in the manner that it serves. We currently are working with 4 courts, and the parking is at max to the point where some of our seniors are having to park on the street or quite a distance just to attend events at the senior center. This is also impacting the customers who are attending or coming to City Hall to conduct City Hall business. And so those impacts have been analyzed, and the parking and the traffic have been analyzed by our Director of Public Works to try to determine if there are some viable options to increase parking around Memorial Park. But it's very difficult to get 8 courts into Memorial Park. City staff worked with some of the vendors and was able to identify Sierra Vista as a more acceptable space for 8 courts. The pickleballers have expressed interest in having tournaments and fundraisers, and that is a more appropriate space for those types of events, and would accommodate the parking area. As Annalise Heisen mentioned, most of the activity happens in the mornings and on the evenings. On Friday evenings, the Women's Club has a standing reservation from 6 to 8 every Friday evening. And then on the weekends, it's sporadic. It's not organized. And so there is a lot of first come, first serve players, and it is more recreational with the organized members coming in during the mornings and on Friday evenings.
And then this conversion of the courts that we're being that's before us tonight, is it a full conversion? Could it be, I mean, I understand, is it posts? Tell me a little bit about the conversion. Are there posts that have to be put in? Could you switch between pickleball and tennis, or is it going to be, these will all be dedicated pickleball? Tell us a little bit about like the process and what you're thinking on the execution, kind of operations of it.
Absolutely. So the plan is to actually do a full court conversion, which means there would be permanent nets for pickleball. But in the other side of the coin is that coming back here to Memorial Park, those tennis courts would then be tennis courts. So we would still have tennis courts for the community. However, Sierra Vista would be solely for the purpose of pickleball.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So my understanding is that you can play pickleball on a tennis court. That's striped and lined for tennis. But as you just noticed, as you just mentioned, once you convert to pickleball, you can't play tennis on that. So is the notion as part of this that the Memorial Park courts would be then limited to tennis, or would we have a situation where we have 8 courts of pickleball in Sierra Vista, and yet still folks wanting to play and convert themselves the tennis courts here at Memorial Park? Would we will allow that option, or was it the idea to create dedicated courts in each place?
The idea was to create dedicated courts at each place. Currently, Sierra Vista, we do have, those are tennis courts. We do not have any lines painted for pickleball. But when the courts are not in use for tennis, we do have others that come in and they will chalk the lines. Now that may happen here as well, but the idea is to create a designated area for pickleball, and that would be specifically at Sierra Vista, and this would be strictly tennis.
So, Madam Mayor mentioned 8 courts. Would we have 8, or would we have 4?
We would have 8 pickleball courts.
Great. Okay. And the $227,000 cost, we're pretty confident we can get it out of Quimby fees or other restricted funds that we have, rather than dipping into any other general fund or anything like that, like we were talking about earlier.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Currently, the city's budget wouldn't able to absorb the full cost of this conversion, and so in order for city staff to seek funding for this project, we are seeking council's approval of the project, so then we can go to county and solicit funds for this project. But in order to be able to request funds or qualifying funds, we first have to have an approved project.
And let's say we don't get any grant money from the county, but we do have Quimby fees and other restricted use funds that we could potentially use for the upgrades.
There are Quimby fees, there are Prop A fees, Measure A fees that could qualify for this. There could also be potentially arts and public places fees, depending on how they're used. But in order for us to apply for some of those funding sources, or to those funding sources, we'd have to have an approved project first.
Understand, okay.
So those would be in the restricted fee category that we saw from earlier tonight, not the unrestricted or general fund.
That's exactly correct. In order to qualify for funding, it would have to be designated for that purpose.
And so we'd be going from 2 large nets, to 8 smaller nets. As far as the ongoing maintenance and upkeep and cost in that, on that regards, how do we propose to pay for that?
That is an excellent question. Not one that I actually have an answer for, but I would have to defer to our Public Works Director, perhaps at another meeting, or if he's able to answer that at this point. He would have a better understanding of what it would take or what the cost would be or where they would come from to support that.
So procedurally, just so I understand, because I'm also concerned about, approving a project with a $227,000 price tag, especially given the discussion we already had tonight. Procedurally, we are being asked to approve this project, and it will be an unfunded project in our budget, such that if it never becomes funded, the fact that we approved it would not then permit funds to come out of the general fund at this point, or do we need to clarify that in what we approve?
The funding is being requested contingent on the acceptance of grant funds or other qualifying funds for the project.
So we could actually approve, well, I want to make sure that we approve it in a way that makes us the most eligible for all of the funding sources that you mentioned. So I don't want to, make it too outside the box. But I mean, the idea being that we're essentially approving the project contingent on funding sources outside of the general fund. Okay. Any other questions?
Could we get a follow-up from Director Yunez on the maintenance costs? I think he was going to give us some ballpark on that.
Good evening, Council. Just based on what we're talking about now, Public Works will be able to absorb the operations. It'll be absorbed into regular maintenance facilities of the area.
I mean, is that because we're dealing with pickleball now, right? Maybe not a full 8 courts, but we're dealing with,
That is correct. We currently have the courts here, which we are already absorbing that maintenance.
We don't have poles and nets, and we're not, people are bringing those themselves, right? It's just striped. Is that correct? Or does the city own its own?
Not as far as the actual equipment, I am not sure if we do not own that. We do not. So I assume that the players bring in their own equipment.
Mayor, if I may add, one of the points in Analyst Hines' presentation was that we do reserve the courts, and that could be a revenue generating component. That the revenue would go directly into the general fund. It's not like it goes into a community services account, but that could be a potential source of revenue for ongoing maintenance, is the reservation of the sports courts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll open this up for public comment.
Anna Mayor, the City Clerk's Office received 7 emails. All emails spoke in favor of creating a dedicated pickleball courts. Those emails have been loaded onto the city's website.
And those spoke of support for the courts irrespective of location, or was there any opinion expressed as to the location?
There were a combination. Some of the comments said that they just want courts, and some of them said they prefer Memorial Park.
Thank you.
They didn't even say they prefer Sierra Vista?
There were, and if you'd like, I can read them. They're all pretty short, if that's the council's desire. But there.
520.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did get them.
Yeah.
Oh, I just got
Yeah.
one from Thomas Holmes.
Scroll down. There are other.
Okay. That's fine.
I don't
Mayor.
recall
I
any
understand.
location being mentioned in any of the emails. They were just in favor of the general idea of the courts.
I see a couple preferring that it remains at Memorial Park.
Okay.
But that's a preference.
Okay. And then we have no speaker cards, I assume?
No speaker cards, ma'am.
Okay, so I will bring it back to council for discussion.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
I like the direction you were headed with this, with the idea that, especially with the budget that we went through earlier tonight, if we can fund it out of restricted funds, out of grants, out of other places, I'm inclined to support it. It seems like there's a enthusiastic and growing group of it, but I don't think we can pull it out of general funds.
Do we even want to go down like the road of potential sponsorships, like having, I don't know if there's like pickleball racket makers that would want to put their name on it and give us some dollars.
Or the Ed Garcia.
Oh, not
No, I think we talked about naming rights. I mean,
Yeah.
I am personally
Are
open
we
to
open
any
to that? Yeah.
funding source.
At the field, at the Little League field, we could sponsor things around.
The other way is we've got a growing community of that, and I think we've had community support in the past to help fund things. We've had fundraisers, I believe, for the lights at Dapper Field, if my memory is correct.
Or no,
No, there's no lights at
no.
Dapper.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but yeah.
Easily.
Thank you. Yes, but I know that we don't have a league or something like that, but I know there's talk about that, and that this could be an incentive. Even if they just raised a couple $1,000s, I think that would go a long way to demonstrating the commitment or the shared commitment to it in the city.
I know the Community Foundation has done special projects like such as Fix the Field and things of that nature as well. So, I mean, hopefully we can get grant money, but it would be nice to have, if we can, to have some participation into the funding.
I'm guessing that most of the funding is going to be going to lighting, right? I mean, we're not going to see a lot of money spent on nets. It's going to go, lighting's expensive.
That's correct, Councilmember Goss. There's some of the funding will go to restriping, netting, and refencing the area, but a good portion of it, you're right, would go to lighting.
Couldn't we get started without lighting and just not do it after dark?
Absolutely, we could look into having a tiered system and levels, and we could have one level where the funding would cover striping and netting, and that way we can get our pickleballers in, and we can do it in phases. Absolutely.
Little League raises their own money for lighting, so we maybe could get the pickleballers to consider kicking in too, but at least give them some games in advance before it gets dark, get their appetite whetted, so to speak.
I know pickleball is a very grantable
Yeah.
sport right now, going off of Judy Chu's different awards in the last 3 years for Women of the Year. The last two, during COVID and then after that, 2 women won for starting pickleball in their cities, and then she granted money to their programs in lieu of that.
Another thought occurred to me, because one reason I think Memorial Park is more popular is, but maybe not in the morning, but in the afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, it's hot out there, and you have all those trees shading that side of the court. You don't have that at Sierra Vista Park. So I'm thinking putting some kind of shade up there on the fence at Sierra Vista Park might also be something we'd want to do.
I think there's some windscreens that are contemplated. Would windscreens provide shade
That would
as well?
be probably, if it was just a dark shaded screen, probably do the trick.
Yeah.
They're
That
not that
was in the
expensive.
commission's discussion. Yes, they did discuss that.
And those can be logoed too.
Yes.
They can be logoed, yes.
I mean, the Methodist Hospital has the entire back screen of the Heasley fence around the outfield. So that was a sponsorship.
I like the idea of the park being very sports oriented with our new strength training section, and then the playground's over there, and then swimming, basketball and pickleball and volleyball.
Yeah, I really do like the fact that I do think that part of the park is underutilized. I think people don't often even realize it's there. They don't go up the road that borders the cemetery, and so yeah, it is. I think it'll maybe drive traffic, literal and figurative, to that part of the park, which is nice, because that whole park is enormous, and I feel like we're all skewed kind of to the east side of it.
And there is existing lighting there. I'm sure it's not optimized for pickleball, obviously, but there are
having
some.
a hard time why would it not work for pickleball if it works for tennis?
I'm not sure it actually works for tennis right now.
Oh.
I mean, I think it's just,
Okay.
you know, the same as, you know, before the Little League upgraded the lights. It's just, you know, degraded over time.
It's like just a light to go in and out of.
They would have to improve the lighting and install LED lighting.
Okay.
Plus, I think we're moving from 2 to 8 courts, and so there's probably just not lighting for
Right.
every part of the.
You have to be.
And the LED lighting would comport with our Dark Skies initiative and all that.
It would, one of the concerns in bringing up the lighting is that, yes, you're increasing the space in which, the playing space, but also the concern that was brought up by one of the vendors was that you don't want a projectile coming at you and going through a dark spot. And there are some dark spots currently identified.
I'd like to support this, contingent upon the funding that you're talking about. I also like to see if we can get it in quicker by maybe suspending the concern for lighting until we can get that funding. Because I feel like the demand is there. We all know the demand's there. We all know people who play pickleball.
I don't know, I was in Arcadia County Park a couple of weeks ago, and there's a nice Catherine Barger sign on one of their facilities. I feel like, you know, this is screaming for a Catherine Barger pickleball court.
Yes.
When I saw her last week, she said she loves Sierra Madre.
She does.
It's right next to the dog park. She can bring her dog to the dog park and play pickleball.
There we go.
All right, if no more discussion, I would welcome a motion around this.
I'd like to make a motion to approve moving forward with the plans for moving the pickleball from Sierra Madre Memorial Park to Sierra Vista Park in a tiered plan where we can get the pickleball courts lined before we even analyze lighting so that we can start in the daytime. And we'd also like to advise to seek funding sources.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Councilmember Lowe, and just to clarify, that's contingent on grant.
Yes, please, thank you. Thank you.
That's how I interpreted the second portion of your. All right, so I'm packing up to go because I think we're done. But is there any topics for future agenda items?
Madam Mayor, do we have on the agenda a refresh of the strategic plan? I thought we were looking at 6 months, I wanted to say. I don't remember when we approved it. I want to say February, so maybe that takes us to August, but I know there's so much work that goes on it. When's the next update on that? Do we know?
Well, we're dark in August, I should say.
Yeah,
so.
we're going to shoot for actually May or June because we're following along with our budget process, our capital improvement discussions, all fold into the strategic plan next update.
Fantastic. Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Please.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously we know that there is a signature gathering process for the public safety tax. We're all aware of that. But I'd like to either agendize, and I don't know if it would be after the date of those signatures, but given what I've heard from the public and given our current staff, I want to make sure that we're considering all funding sources to make sure that we can fund our public safety. Because we know where we've cut, and we know that we have a zero-based budget. The five of us know all this. There's really no other way except having another revenue source. So I don't know if it's a plan B or at least a discussion of the council to come up with some type of opinions regarding funding sources outside of a citizen-led initiative.
So are you saying a little bit of the flip side of what we did tonight, which we were delving a bit into the expense side? You're sort of saying something similar on the revenue side?
Yes, and maybe, yeah, and it could be considering what revenue sources there are out there, and maybe there's a council-led initiative. I don't know. I think it's might be contingent, but I think we have a duty to at least have this conversation for the benefit of our residents.
I mean, and I would be interested, just on that note, to know, I mean, if there are other funding sources that have been considered and determined to not be feasible, I think it'd be good to have that conversation in public, because I'm sure, I mean, we've had discussions, you know, with city staff over the years about things that, you know, maybe other cities are doing, or things that have been considered here in the past, and maybe why they didn't work out, or they don't generate enough funds, or whatever the concern could be, and have that discussion, even if we think it's not necessarily a viable source. I think it's good for the public to hear that consideration has been put into those things. You're right, because, you know, nobody wants to pay more taxes for sure, but everyone wants to, I think, continue to enjoy the services that are provided. And so there's a push, there's a give there.
And I think part of it would be, because we talked about retention and recruitment, but let's say, I just want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for future success. And maybe it's something in 2026 even, but I think we need to consider and talk about that as a council, all options, to make sure that our public safety staff and employees know that we support them. Well, maybe we'll have a discussion, but I think we've all said that from this dais that we do, regardless of what happens in the next few months.
Yeah, I think the one thing for our city attorney to consider is just framing this appropriately so that we don't cross any lines with respect. You know, again, I think that was your point about maybe having it after a certain date in the petition process. But I want to make sure that we're doing things the right way with respect to the ongoing petition
And I think
process.
part of it would be an analysis from the city attorney's office as far as different funding sources and options and what that entails.
Deputy City Manager, can you tell us what date those signatures would need to be turned in, so we can maybe look at a date after that?
Thank you. So, according to the election calendar, the suggested last day to file a petition regarding a ballot measure is May 17th.
Okay.
And just another clarification, does it need to come before council before May 17th?
No, it
Because
needs
if
to be
it's done-
filed with the city clerk's office by May 17th.
Okay, so we don't have to take any action if it gets put on the ballot.
No, you
Yes,
don't have
it
to
does.
take any action if they get the signatures.
If they get the signatures, I'm sorry, yeah, if there's enough signatures to put it on the ballot, then we don't have to take any action to put it on the ballot. It's already put on the ballot.
No, we still have to take
We
action.
still have
To
to
vote
action.
to put on the ballot.
Yeah.
Okay,
But it's
so
not-
that time frame includes the time for the council, so that if it's May 17th is when we have to have this, when the signatures have to come in by, then there is the May 26th, I want to say.
28.
28th, thank you. 28th council meeting, and that's when we'd have to do it, and that would meet all of the time frame? Or would we have to do it on May 13th?
Could we, well, this is a question, could we have a discussion before we,
Okay, why don't we let
Maybe next meeting we can have something agendized to.
Why don't we let the city clerk answer the questions first, and then we can move to the next question.
Thank you. So the city clerk's office would require the petition to be filed in the office by May 17th. Assuming that the petition qualifies, then the city clerk's office would bring to the city council a request to put this on the ballot and provide options, including at the next election, or a special election, or an election thereafter. At that meeting, the city clerk's office would then also be asking for the city council to call for the November election. And so it would be a bundle package.
And what's the time, and what's the deadline for that? Would it have to be that next meeting, or is there more time after that?
There's more time to call for an election, but if we're coming to the city council with the petition, we're gonna come to the council with everything.
Got it. So it was the roundabout way of saying that it's likely that we're to see something if the petition qualifies on the 28th, the meeting on the 28th.
That's the soonest it would come.
All right, and so, sorry, then to Council Member Lowe's question, can we have this discussion around funding sources separate and apart from the petition process? Although we only have 2 meetings before, we only have 1 meeting before that anyway. But would it be advisable to wait?
It's going to go to the council. There are two, like you said, there are 2 separate discussions, so you can have that before, you can have that after. You can also have a discussion about the impacts of the initiative, either before it's actually certified or after. So if you wanted to have that discussion about the impacts of the initiative, you can lump them both together into the same meeting if you'd like.
That might be good.
Mayor, and I'd like to seek a little more clarification on funding sources. I just don't know that with the budget process that our finance department has time to commit to doing a presentation. If it's legal funding sources and something that can come from the city attorney, we can work with him on that, but I can't commit the finance department to anything else for that.
I think that was the spirit of what I was asking, is not the dollars and cents, because we got that tonight. I think it's what options there are, how you go about them, how they're voted upon, what the typical education process timeline looks like. Because we had all this from the same law firm back in 2015, as I recall. So something similar, a legal type of analysis informing the council of what the options are.
And I guess we can, as our discussion, consider feasibility. I mean, that's really sort of what we're here to do, right?
I think related to that, so I don't know if this is a council item. I guess it would be a council item. Would be some workshops with the community. I think we've got a good opportunity here to educate this. I know that there's been articles in the paper on it, but I think it'd be good to have kind of almost like a town hall at some point along these lines. I don't know
which
where
lines? I mean,
around the lines of revenue needs for the city. Getting the feedback from the city, from the residents of the city, I think would be important in whatever direction we take.
Historically similar to what we did for UUT.
Yeah,
thank you,
probably.
council member. So,
Getting input from the community.
yeah.
Presumably that would fall outside of the time frame we were just discussing with city clerk?
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean,
think so, yeah.
we're talking,
Discussion and then.
Yeah.
I'll remind folks that it's April 23rd.
What?
Yes, exactly, so. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? That isn't enough? Anything else?
More direction?
Okay, if nothing else,
Adjourn?
yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.